The moment the cloak was draped over her, Olivia Carter immediately felt warmth from Richard Lancaster's action. She smiled slightly in gratitude towards him. Richard Lancaster cupped his hands and bowed before the Empress, saying, "Your Majesty, the two young ladies of the Carter estate fell into the water and are completely soaked. The early summer wind is still cold. How about letting them change their clothes before investigating this matter? What do you think?" Chapter 2, Turning Black into White. What further investigation? If the investigation continued, sooner or later, the Crown Prince would be dragged into marrying this foolish Olivia Carter. The Empress looked coldly at Richard Lancaster, a lump of anger stuck in her throat. She glanced at Richard Lancaster several times, then looked at Olivia Carter kneeling on the ground. After repeating this a few times, a thought suddenly flashed through her mind. "Richard, I remember that silk handkerchief. It was the other day when you and the Crown Prince came to my palace for tea. Because tea spilled on you, the Crown Prince gave you this handkerchief to use. Why is it now in Third Miss Carter's hands?" The Empress smiled, but there was no joy in her eyes. "Perhaps you have admired Third Miss Carter for a long time, so you gave her this handkerchief, but she mistakenly thought it was a gift from the Crown Prince." Such an ability to turn black into white was truly astonishing. Of course, no one present believed the Empress's words. They couldn't help but look at Richard Lancaster with a bit of sympathy, thinking that the third prince had truly encountered an unwarranted disaster this time and shouldn't have played the hero for Olivia Carter just now. "Sure enough," the Empress continued, "if the two of you are in love, then I will issue an imperial decree, ordering the Bureau of Astronomy to choose an auspicious date for your marriage. How about that?" Although the Empress spoke as if she was discussing, there was no room for negotiation in her tone. Richard Lancaster could only kneel and say, "I obey the decree." I also obey the decree." Olivia Carter could only pretend to be naive and lower her head with Richard Lancaster to accept the decree. Richard Lancaster, the third prince of the Eastern Victory Kingdom, at the age of 10, while accompanying the king on an autumn hunt, encountered a ferocious tiger that startled his horse, throwing him to the ground. This accident left him with a lame leg and deafness in his right ear, often unable to hear clearly when someone spoke on his right side. A once valiant and outstanding young man was now ruined, unable to excel in either scholarly pursuits or martial arts, becoming the least accomplished of all the princes. The Empress watched Richard Lancaster receive the imperial edict, a cold, silent laughter echoing in her heart. A fool and a cripple, truly a match made in heaven. Her sharp gaze shifted to Olivia Carter, her thoughts turning dark. This fool wants to enter the Crown Prince's residence. Today, I will shatter that wishful dream. Evelyn Carter leaned against Miranda Nightshade, shivering from the cold, yet upon seeing Olivia Carter decreed to marry the crippled third prince, thus severing any connection to the Crown Prince, a wave of malicious glee washed over her. She almost couldn't resist the urge to rise and kowtow thrice before the Empress to express her gratitude. Lost in her smug thoughts, Evelyn Carter's eyes met Olivia Carter's, a look of enigmatic amusement playing on her lips. Olivia Carter subtly curled her lips, mouthing words without uttering a sound. Evelyn Carter understood her lip movements. "Sister, don't celebrate too soon." A chill ran down Evelyn Carter's spine. She had a growing sense that her naturally foolish younger sister was somehow different now. The Peony Blossom Festival, originally intended to choose a consort for Frederick Lancaster, unexpectedly resulted in a union, whether fortunate or ill-fated, between Richard Lancaster and Olivia Carter. In an instant, the entire capital of the Eastern Victory Kingdom buzzed with gossip. Olivia Carter sat in the parlor of her courtyard, listening to the excited chatter of the young maids sweeping the yard, yet her expression remained impassive as she calmly sipped her tea. In contrast, her close maid, Elara Moonstone, unable to contain herself any longer, stormed into the courtyard, intending to reprimand the gossiping maids. "Stop!" Olivia Carter's sharp voice halted her. "Where are you going?" "They're going too far. Miss, you're marrying the third prince, a cripple, and they dare say you've struck it rich. Elara Moonstone exclaimed, her anger bubbling over. She abruptly turned, her eyes wide with disbelief as she looked at Olivia Carter. Miss, you're not a fool anymore. Olivia Carter's eyes, clear and bright, met hers, reflecting a lucidity she had never possessed before. Do I look like a fool to you? Wonderful, miss, your foolishness has vanished. Elara Moonstone's joy was so overwhelming she almost jumped for joy, but her face quickly fell. But miss, you're going to marry that crippled third prince. In Elara Moonstone's eyes, her third miss was beautiful and kind, only slightly foolish, and now even that foolishness was gone, truly flawless. Yet, to be betrothed to the lame and deaf third prince, how could she not feel aggrieved? The third prince might not be so bad. Olivia Carter recalled the hands that had placed the cloak around her in the Imperial Garden. Richard Lancaster, she realized, was a thoughtful and considerate man. How can he be good when he's both lame and deaf? Elara Moonstone retorted, exasperated. You don't understand. Choosing a husband isn't just about appearances. Olivia Carter smiled faintly. She had been unintentionally transported to this world, where marriages were dictated by parental decrees and matchmakers. Rather than being married off to some unknown man by her stepmother, who wished for her early demise, she preferred to choose Richard Lancaster herself. Moreover, Richard Lancaster's crippled state suited her just fine. If he dared to displease her, with her 21st century special forces background, she wouldn't hesitate to knock his teeth out. Besides, Richard Lancaster's princely status could be useful. She stood up. Come, let's go to Madame's courtyard. That bitch Olivia Carter deserves it. Trying to seduce the crown prince, and what happened? Angered the empress and got betrothed to that crippled third prince, ha ha ha, mother, isn't that hilarious? As Olivia Carter entered Miranda Nightshade's courtyard, she heard Evelyn Carter's arrogant, triumphant laughter emanating from the main room. Elara Moonstone, standing beside her, flushed with anger. Miranda Nightshade's voice drifted out, she's a fool. Marrying a crippled prince as his official wife is a blessing. At least he's a prince. Otherwise, she'd be destined to be a concubine. I am, after all, a proper princess. Mother and second sister, speaking like this, aren't you intentionally disrespecting the royal family? Olivia Carter entered the main room, looking at Miranda Nightshade with a gentle smile. Nonsense. When did I disrespect the royal family? Miranda Nightshade's face immediately turned cold. Disrespecting the royal family was a crime punishable by death. How could she let Olivia Carter put such a large hat on her head? But I clearly heard mother and second sister call the third prince a cripple. Gossiping behind the emperor's son's back like this, I wonder what his majesty would think if he heard. Or should we ask father? Olivia Carter's words caused both Miranda Nightshade and Evelyn Carter's faces to darken. Yesterday, at the Peony Flower Festival, although Chancellor Carter was unable to attend due to other matters, everything that transpired at the banquet was reported back to him. He naturally knew about his two daughters falling into Moon Reflection Lake. Any discerning person could see that it was the Empress's deliberate favoritism towards the Crown Prince that led to the pairing of Olivia Carter and Richard Lancaster. Everyone understood the truth. The story of Evelyn Carter's jealousy and attempted harm towards her younger sister spread like wildfire in a single day, no less sensational than the laughable marriage between Richard Lancaster and Olivia Carter. This resulted in Chancellor Carter severely reprimanding Evelyn Carter and Miranda Nightshade. They were still fuming, and now Olivia Carter was deliberately poking at their sore spot. You bitch. Don't think you're above us just because you're betrothed to the third prince. Evelyn Carter blurted out angrily. Tell father. Will father care more about a piece of trash like you, or us? I'm trash. Even if I am, at least the crown prince noticed me. Second sister wanted to be the crown prince's concubine, but he didn't even spare her a glance. Olivia Carter smiled. Sister, you don't even have the fate to be a concubine. Aren't you even more trash than me? Evelyn Carter's face flushed red with anger. She was about to retort when Miranda Nightshade stopped her. Miranda Nightshade looked at Olivia Carter suspiciously. Are you not stupid anymore? In the past, Olivia Carter wouldn't have understood Evelyn Carter's taunts, let alone retort so effectively. Mother, haven't you heard of playing the fool? Olivia Carter stood calmly, her demeanor composed. Oh, so you were pretending to be stupid to fool us all this time. Evelyn Carter stared at Olivia Carter for a moment, then burst out laughing. So what if you're smarter now? You still have to marry the third prince. The crown prince's residence, you can forget about ever stepping foot in there. Second sister, you may treasure the crown prince, but I certainly don't. Olivia Carter sneered, her gaze shifting to Miranda Nightshade before finally getting to the point. I'm here today to ask Mother about the dowry preparations for my upcoming marriage to the third prince. Miranda Nightshade's face stiffened, she understood Olivia Carter's implication. Olivia's birth mother, Amelia Roberts, hailed from a wealthy Jiangnan family and had brought a substantial dowry upon marrying into the Carter estate. Before her death, Amelia Roberts stipulated in her will that the entire dowry be left to Olivia Carter as her marriage settlement. This dowry had always been under Miranda Nightshade's control. The shops and lands generated significant annual profits, fueling her greed. Now, faced with returning such a large sum, how could she possibly be reconciled to it? Just then, a maid entered and announced, Madam, the master says the third prince has arrived at the estate to present betrothal gifts. He requests your presence to receive him. Understood. Miranda Nightshade replied, as if granted a reprieve. She rose and said to Olivia Carter, we'll discuss the dowry later. The third prince is here, I must go and receive him. With that, she hurried out, not giving Olivia Carter a chance to speak further. Chapter 3, Shameless Olivia Carter sneered again, also rising and heading towards the outer courtyard, her pace even faster than Miranda Nightshade's. Miranda Nightshade, left behind, called after her, where are you going? Since Mother refuses to return the dowry my mother left me, I must naturally go to the outer courtyard and ask the third prince to preside over this matter for me. Olivia Carter replied without turning back, continuing towards the outer courtyard. You, Miranda Nightshade fumed, shameless. What unmarried lady has her husband's family intervene in dowry matters? Come back here this instant. What is shame? Can you eat it? Olivia Carter feigned innocence, turning to look at Miranda Nightshade, momentarily reverting to her previous foolish demeanor. Mother, fools don't know shame. Even if I once did, years of your torment have forced me to throw it to the dogs. So, you not only want to claim your dowry but also settle accounts for the past years? I tell you, dream on. You won't take a single thing out of Chancellor Carter's estate. A vicious glint flashed in Miranda Nightshade's eyes. She thought, isn't he just a crippled prince? I, the esteemed second-rank madam of Chancellor Carter's estate, should I fear him? Not necessarily. Olivia Carter smiled sweetly, quickening her pace as she left the curtained doorway and headed straight for the Fortune and Prosperity Hall in the front courtyard, the reception area. Upon seeing Richard Lancaster and a man dressed as a eunuch drinking tea in the hall, she viciously pinched her arm, forcing tears to well up. Lifting her head, her gaze met Richard Lancaster's startled look as he held his teacup. Clearly, her actions hadn't escaped his notice. But that didn't deter Olivia Carter from continuing her performance. With tears brimming in her eyes, she rushed towards Chancellor Carter, who was seated in the main position, and cried out in a choked voice, Father, Mother hit me. A look of embarrassment flickered across Chancellor Carter's face. In the past, this foolish daughter of his always caused trouble, and it wouldn't have mattered if Miranda Nightshade disciplined her a little. But today, with the third prince and eunuch Augustus Vane present, if the emperor were to learn that Miranda Nightshade mistreated the future third princess consort, it would reflect poorly on them, suggesting they disregarded the emperor's grace. "I was only joking with you, my dear. I would never truly hit you." Chancellor Carter hastily soothed Olivia Carter. It's worth noting that since Olivia Carter had grown up, this was the first time he had treated his naturally foolish daughter with such gentleness. It wasn't a joke. Olivia Carter shook her head vigorously, rolling up her sleeve to reveal the arm she had just pinched until it was bruised. On her fair arm, the blue and red bruise was clearly visible. Olivia Carter held out her injured arm and sobbed, "Father, it hurts." For a moment, Olivia Carter saw Richard Lancaster's expression stiffen slightly, clearly wanting to laugh but not daring to do so in front of Olivia Carter's superb performance. "Chancellor Carter, what is the meaning of this?" Eunuch Augustus Vane's face immediately darkened. "Isn't third Miss Carter the soon-to-be wife of the third prince? Is this how you treat her in the Carter household?" Eunuch Augustus Vane had served the emperor for a long time, and he was a wise and smooth operator. He always maintained a respectful distance from all the princes, readily offering assistance whenever possible. This way, regardless of which prince ascended the throne, he wouldn't have to worry about his retirement. Even with Richard Lancaster, a crippled prince with no claim to the throne, he didn't hesitate to step in and help with matters like this. That's why the emperor had sent him to deliver the betrothal gifts to the Carter household this time, fearing that the disabled Richard Lancaster, with his poor hearing, wouldn't be able to handle the situation. "What are you doing?" Chancellor Carter's expression was flustered, unsure of how to respond to Eunuch Augustus Vane. Just then, Miranda Nightshade arrived, a step behind. He immediately shifted the blame onto her. "If Lin Ni has done something wrong, you should speak to her kindly instead of punishing her like this." Olivia Carter sneered inwardly. This was her dear father. His words sounded like he was defending her, but in reality, he was implying that Olivia Carter was at fault and deserved to be punished, hoping to use this opportunity to smooth things over. Miranda Nightshade was taken aback. "My lord, when did I punish her?" Although Miranda Nightshade was truly innocent this time, she and Evelyn Carter had bullied and scolded Olivia Carter on numerous occasions in the past, a fact Chancellor Carter was well aware of. Therefore, he didn't believe her words at all, thinking she was just trying to shirk responsibility. He immediately felt that his wife was truly unreasonable and frowned. "Then where did the injury on Lin Ni's arm come from? This bruise looks like it was caused by someone pinching her, not from bumping into something." Only then did Miranda Nightshade clearly see the bruise on Olivia Carter's exposed fair arm and immediately understood the situation. Just as she was about to accuse Olivia Carter of framing her, Olivia Carter quickly burst into tears, crying before Chancellor Carter, "Father, I only wanted to ask Mother about the large dowry my birth mother left me, but as soon as I mentioned it, she scolded and hit me, saying that even if she didn't give me the dowry, I couldn't do anything about it because I'm just a fool." On the surface, Olivia Carter seemed to be complaining to Chancellor Carter, but in reality, she deliberately spoke loud enough for Richard Lancaster and Eunuch Augustus Vane to hear. At this moment, Chancellor Carter finally realized something was amiss. He looked at Olivia Carter in surprise, because with her usual naive personality, how could she understand the matter of the large inheritance Amelia Roberts had left her? Moreover, the Carter family's wealth was renowned throughout Jiangnan, and the dowry Amelia Roberts brought to the Chancellor Carter estate years ago was nearly half its value. Chancellor Carter had profited considerably from it. Now, forcing him to give up such a vast collection of land, shops, and jewelry, along with his foolish daughter Olivia Carter, to Richard Lancaster in marriage was like cutting off a piece of his own flesh. It felt like a significant loss no matter how he looked at it. "Lin Ni, we'll discuss this later." Chancellor Carter snapped at Olivia Carter with a cold expression. Olivia Carter blinked at Richard Lancaster, thinking, "Your body may be crippled, but your mind shouldn't be, right? I've made it this clear, you can't possibly not help me, can you?" Under Olivia Carter's insistent gaze, Richard Lancaster cleared his throat and addressed Chancellor Carter, "Chancellor Carter, it's best to clarify this matter now. Olivia Carter is my betrothed, her affairs are also mine, and I cannot ignore them. Well, Richard Lancaster had spoken, and although Chancellor Carter always looked down on this prince who held no weight in court, eunuch Augustus Vane was present. He couldn't completely disregard Richard Lancaster. Otherwise, if eunuch Augustus Vane reported back to the emperor, His Majesty might think that he, Chancellor Carter, had held his position for too long, becoming arrogant and daring to disrespect his son. Richard Lancaster, don't spout nonsense. Chancellor Carter might have been wary of Richard Lancaster, but Miranda Nightshade, a simple-minded woman, wasn't. In her eyes, this crippled prince, Richard Lancaster, wasn't even worth as much as one of Chancellor Carter's assistants. Furthermore, Olivia Carter's perfect performance in front of outsiders had thoroughly embarrassed her. Fury surged within her, and she immediately lashed out at Olivia Carter. Your mother has been dead for years, there's no dowry she could have left you. Everything you eat, wear, every single coin comes from the Chancellor Carter estate. You show no gratitude, and even try to take advantage. You truly are an ungrateful wretch that the Chancellor Carter estate has raised. As soon as the words left her mouth, both Chancellor Carter and eunuch Augustus Vane's expressions changed. After all, Olivia Carter was about to become the third prince's concubine. Miranda Nightshade dared to berate Olivia Carter in front of eunuch Augustus Vane and Richard Lancaster, not only showing disrespect to Richard Lancaster but also disregarding the imperial authority. You're lying. Lin Ni isn't ungrateful. Olivia Carter's tears fell like broken pearls, soaking her clothes. She looked at Miranda Nightshade with utter resentment and cried out, "My mother left a letter, saying she left me 10 chests of jewels, 50 acres of fertile land, and 60 thriving shops." 60 shops. There were only 30, Miranda Nightshade blurted out before realizing her slip-up. Seeing the cunning glint in Olivia Carter's eyes, she immediately understood she'd fallen into a trap. Rage consumed her, and she lunged at Olivia Carter, intending to strike her. "You little slut, you tricked me." Striking Olivia Carter had become a habit for her. In her fury, she completely forgot there were outsiders present, until Chancellor Carter's enraged roar, his face dark as thunder, stopped her. "Stop." Only then did she remember that Richard Lancaster and eunuch Augustus Vane were still there. So this is how Madam Chancellor Carter raises her illegitimate children. Even the tactful eunuch Augustus Vane couldn't hold back any longer. He sneered, truly an eye-opening experience. He hadn't expected that accompanying Richard Lancaster to deliver the betrothal gifts would lead to witnessing such a farcical scene of a stepmother stealing the dowry and oppressing her stepdaughter. If Chancellor Carter disregards the dignity of the third prince and myself, and berates the third prince's wife right in front of us, then I have nothing more to say. After returning to the palace, I will certainly report everything that happened today to His Majesty. Right or wrong, let His Majesty be the judge. Having said that, eunuch Augustus Vane stood up and flicked his sleeves, turning to leave. Chancellor Carter's face paled in terror. He hurriedly stepped forward, tugging at eunuch Augustus Vane's sleeve, pleading, "Eunuch, please wait. My foolish wife doesn't know the gravity of the situation and has offended you. Please be magnanimous and forgive her." Then, turning his head, he roared at Miranda Nightshade, "Come here and apologize to eunuch Augustus Vane at once." Enough. Eunuch Augustus Vane raised his hand to stop the smirking woman as she was about to step forward. His gaze shifted to Olivia Carter, filled with sympathy. "The one who has been insulted and frightened is not me, but the third prince's wife." He emphasized each word of "third prince's wife," completely omitting the phrase "not yet wed," clearly intending to elevate Olivia Carter's status and suppress the arrogance of Miranda Nightshade and Chancellor Carter. He wanted them to understand that even if Richard Lancaster wasn't favored by His Majesty, he was still a prince, and Olivia Carter was his wife. Olivia Carter's face was Richard Lancaster's face. Her berating Olivia Carter was no different from berating Richard Lancaster himself. ###Chapter 4, binding together, you, apologize to Lin Ni and the third prince immediately. Chancellor Carter bellowed furiously at Miranda Nightshade, wiping the cold sweat from his brow. He understood Eunuch Augustus Vane's implication perfectly. Disrespecting the royal family could lead to losing one's head at best, and the extermination of the entire family at worst. If Eunuch Augustus Vane were to report back to the palace, he wouldn't even dream of keeping his position as chancellor. He'd be thrown directly into the Ministry of Justice's prison. Although Miranda Nightshade didn't grasp the deeper meaning in Eunuch Augustus Vane's words, seeing Chancellor Carter's stern expression, she didn't dare to defy him. Gritting her teeth, she first apologized to Richard Lancaster, then turned to Olivia Carter, her voice softening into a wheedling tone. Lin Ni, I was wrong just now. Can you forgive me? Then, where is the dowry my mother left me? Olivia Carter blinked, her expression resolute. Miranda Nightshade hesitated, but seeing Eunuch Augustus Vane raise an eyebrow, Chancellor Carter immediately interjected, we'll give it to you. I'll make sure your mother prepares it all. Husband! Miranda Nightshade cried out to Chancellor Carter, unwilling to comply. Shut up! Chancellor Carter had never felt such disgust for his foolish, power-abusing wife. Couldn't she see that Eunuch Augustus Vane was still standing there? Agreeing first was the priority. Whether they actually gave it later, would Eunuch Augustus Vane really come back to check? Then write me a guarantee, so you don't go back on your word. Chancellor Carter's petty scheme couldn't escape Olivia Carter's sharp eyes. Chancellor Carter intended to stall, waiting for Eunuch Augustus Vane to leave before dealing with the matter. However, seeing Eunuch Augustus Vane raise his eyebrow even higher, he immediately ordered someone to bring brush and ink. Write it. Write it now. The guarantee was written on the spot, stamped with his personal seal. Olivia Carter took the guarantee and, her face beaming with joy, ran to Eunuch Augustus Vane. Thank you, Eunuch Augustus Vane. Not at all, not at all, you are the third imperial consort, it is my duty to serve you. Eunuch Augustus Vane looked at Olivia Carter, smiling brightly as a peach blossom, immediately taking a liking to this third imperial consort. Keep this agreement safe, if anything is unclear, you can ask His Third Highness for help. All right. Olivia Carter cheerfully agreed, casting a seductive glance at Richard Lancaster, nearly causing him to choke on his tea. Thinking that if Richard Lancaster hadn't coincidentally arrived to propose today, things might not have gone so smoothly, Olivia Carter immediately felt more favorably towards him, and suddenly felt that marrying him wasn't such a bad deal after all. Chancellor Carter, the gifts have been presented, His Third Highness and I must return to the palace to report, we dare not impose any further. Eunuch Augustus Vane said to Chancellor Carter, I have memorized today's dowry list of the third imperial consort, I hope Chancellor Carter also remembers it, otherwise, I will have to accompany the third imperial consort to His Majesty to seek justice. Rest assured. Chancellor Carter's heart ached at the thought of the vast fortune, but he maintained a calm facade. Olivia Carter worried he might have a stroke from suppressing his emotions. On the contrary, Miranda Nightshade couldn't maintain her composure. From the moment Chancellor Carter wrote the dowry list, her eyes were fixed on Olivia Carter with resentment. Olivia Carter didn't care, her goal had been achieved. Let Miranda Nightshade stare, it wouldn't cost her anything. She saw Richard Lancaster and Eunuch Augustus Vane off from the Carter estate, then tucked the agreement into her bosom, humming softly as she strolled back to her courtyard. 2 carriages were parked in front of the Carter estate. Before boarding his carriage, Eunuch Augustus Vane suddenly remembered something and turned to Richard Lancaster with a smile, Your Highness is truly fortunate. I find this third imperial consort not only devastatingly beautiful but also very intelligent, completely unlike the rumors of her being foolish. Indeed. Richard Lancaster lowered his head in thought, then smiled and said, I must thank Eunuch Augustus Vane for your assistance today. If I had relied solely on myself, I fear it would have been ineffective. A golden carp is not meant for a pond, Eunuch Augustus Vane chuckled and boarded his carriage. Your Highness should not underestimate yourself. Ever since Olivia Carter had demanded back a large portion of the dowry, Miranda Nightshade had been so furious that she remained in her courtyard for days, refusing to come out. She sulked with Chancellor Carter, demanding he retrieve the dowry. Chancellor Carter was also annoyed by Miranda Nightshade's foolishness and hadn't visited her courtyard for days, instead favoring his new concubine. Learning this, Miranda Nightshade was so enraged she couldn't eat. Just then, Evelyn Carter came to cause trouble. She had gone to Olivia Carter's courtyard to create a scene several times, but each time Olivia Carter had ignored her and sent her away. So, she ran to Miranda Nightshade's courtyard to complain. Mother! Are you really going to let that little slut take such a large dowry with her when she marries? This dowry list is several times larger than what elder sister received when she married the second prince. If I marry in the future, how much dowry will you give me? If I can't surpass her, I'll lose face, but you will too. In that case, I'd rather never marry. What's the rush? Miranda Nightshade roared, how can I let Olivia Carter force me to spit out the fat meat I've already swallowed? She can dream on. Your father is concerned about his reputation and refuses to force her to hand over the dowry, so we'll make her hand it over herself. Mother, have you devised a clever plan? Evelyn Carter's eyes sparkled. A few days ago, I sent an invitation to your cousin from the Zhao family. He should have arrived by now, Miranda Nightshade said confidently. Mordecai Vane. Evelyn Carter exclaimed with delight. Excellent. Olivia Carter has always been fond of Mordecai Vane. But do you intend to catch them in the act to ruin Olivia Carter's marriage? Ruining her marriage isn't enough. If she clings to that dowry, we won't gain anything, Miranda Nightshade said with a cold, venomous smile. Of course, we'll give Mordecai Vane a sum of money, entice Olivia Carter to elope with him, and then kill her. Indeed, only the dead have no need for money. Evelyn Carter burst into laughter. Madam, the young master from the Zhao family has arrived. At that moment, a maid standing outside the curtain announced. Miranda Nightshade and Evelyn Carter exchanged smiles, their eyes gleaming with the same sinister and malevolent light. For the past few days, Olivia Carter, exasperated by Evelyn Carter's constant harassment, had closed her doors to visitors, secluding herself in the room behind the courtyard to research poison concoctions and practice her martial arts. It must be said that Olivia Carter's physique in this life wasn't bad, not much inferior to her previous life. Today, she had only completed half of her practice when she heard someone calling her name from the wall, cousin, cousin. Annoyed, she looked up and saw a handsome young man in scholar's attire peering down at her from the wall. Mordecai Vane. What was he doing climbing the wall of her courtyard? Olivia Carter frowned slightly, silently gazing at Mordecai Vane. In truth, Mordecai Vane wasn't Olivia Carter's actual cousin. He was a distant relative of Alara Finch, the birth mother of Lisa Carter, Olivia Carter's elder sister, who had become a concubine of the second prince. Their blood relation was so distant that it extended beyond the 5 degrees of mourning. Simply because Mordecai Vane had studied for a few years at the Carter family school, the young ladies in Chancellor Carter's household called him cousin out of respect. However, Mordecai Vane was an insatiable and ambitious man, determined to become Chancellor Carter's son-in-law. Having failed in his attempts to court Lisa Carter and Evelyn Carter, he had set his sights on the naive and foolish Olivia Carter, charming her into constantly expressing her desire to marry him. But Chancellor Carter disapproved of Mordecai Vane, believing that an alliance with such a man could lead to lifelong complications, and refused to even marry off his foolish daughter to him. Mordecai Vane, enraged, had returned to his hometown, but unexpectedly received a letter from Miranda Nightshade, stating that she was willing to help him marry Olivia Carter. Although vying for a wife against the third prince was incredibly risky, if he could forge a connection with Chancellor Carter, wouldn't his entry into officialdom be much smoother? Moreover, Olivia Carter possessed breathtaking beauty, a national treasure, a beauty that Mordecai Vane had long coveted. Therefore, he recklessly agreed to Miranda Nightshade's terms. After all, Miranda Nightshade had assured him that Olivia Carter was a fool. If anything were to happen, they could simply pin all the blame on her, absolving him of any responsibility. Yet, upon seeing Olivia Carter today, he sensed something different about her. Not only was she practicing martial arts in the courtyard, but the way she looked at him was no longer gentle as before, replaced by an icy coldness. "Cousin. Cousin Olivia," Mordecai Vane stammered, licking his lips. "What's wrong? Are you not happy to see me?" "Happy, of course I'm happy." Olivia Carter smiled innocently, but inside, she was nauseated with disgust. From the original owner's memories, she knew exactly how Mordecai Vane had manipulated Olivia Carter, even using her to steal from her own household for him. "What brings you here today, cousin?" Seeing Olivia Carter's smile, Mordecai Vane immediately breathed a sigh of relief. He quickly climbed over the wall, jumped down into the courtyard, and approached her, smiling. "To see you, of course." "Cousin, please maintain decorum," Olivia Carter abruptly stepped back. "You must have heard, I am currently the betrothed of the third prince. To avoid unpleasant rumors, please keep your distance." "Cousin, do you truly intend to marry that crippled third prince?" A pained expression appeared on Mordecai Vane's face. "Have you forgotten our vows? I thought, after you left, those past matters had become like smoke and clouds." Olivia Carter lowered her eyes, replying softly, feigning heartache. "No, I haven't forgotten any of it." Seeing Olivia Carter's expression, Mordecai Vane, believing she still had feelings for him, became agitated. "Cousin, after hearing news of your betrothal, I traveled day and night to get here. I know you're not resigned to this, you still love me. Let's run away together." He's finally getting to the point. Olivia Carter laughed coldly in her heart, but feigned surprise on her face. How could this be possible? Why not? Mordecai Vane grew more excited as he spoke. "We grew up together, our feelings developed from childhood, we were meant to be. What right does the third prince have to steal my love? Come with me, Lin Ni." Even his form of address has changed. Olivia Carter, observing Mordecai Vane's heroic expression, suddenly asked, "Do my mother and father know you're here today?" "No, they don't." Olivia Carter's unexpected question about Miranda Nightshade nearly made Mordecai Vane stutter. He hastily denied it. "I came secretly to take you away." Just relying on a scholar like him, what ability does he have to break into the heavily guarded Chancellor Carter estate? No one would believe that. Clearly, someone let him in, and as for who that person is, Olivia Carter's smile bloomed radiantly like a peony. "Take me away, cousin." Chapter 5, Punishing the Stepmother. Olivia Carter gathered a few belongings and quietly followed Mordecai Vane out of the estate through the back gate. The entire way, it was as if no one was there to stop them, even the guards at the back gate were nowhere to be seen. Olivia Carter couldn't help but marvel inwardly, Miranda Nightshade had truly paved the way for Mordecai Vane, even having a carriage prepared and waiting right at the back gate. After they boarded the carriage, Mordecai Vane wasted no time, immediately driving straight out of the city. As they passed the city god temple, night had fallen. Mordecai Vane said to Olivia Carter, "Lin Ni, let's wait here for a moment. A friend promised to bring us money here. Without travel funds, we won't be able to go far." "All right." Olivia Carter nodded obediently, got out of the carriage, and followed Mordecai Vane into the city god temple. Inside the temple, Mordecai Vane first lit a torch and then handed her a water bottle. "Have some water to quench your thirst." Olivia Carter took the water bottle, and as soon as she opened the lid, she smelled something unusual. She pretended to take a few sips, then acted sleepy, leaned against a pillar, and feigned sleep. "Lin Ni, Lin Ni." Mordecai Vane shook Olivia Carter a couple of times, and seeing no response, immediately said, "Victor Darkwood, she's asleep. A middle-aged man suddenly appeared from behind the city god statue. It turned out to be Victor Darkwood, Butler Darkwood of Chancellor Carter's residence. Victor Darkwood walked up to Olivia Carter, looked at her a few times to confirm she was asleep, then smiled at Mordecai Vane and said, "Well done. So, where's the banknote that Madam promised me?" Mordecai Vane asked with a fawning smile. Earlier, Miranda Nightshade had promised that as long as he successfully lured Olivia Carter into eloping with him, she would give him a large sum of money to use for their escape. Once he and Olivia Carter were married, even if Chancellor Carter didn't want to acknowledge him, he would have to, or else it would become a disgrace to the Chancellor Carter household. As for the third prince, they could simply give the excuse that Olivia Carter had a serious illness and her appearance was ruined by ugly scars, which would be enough to cancel the engagement. Then, they could find a replacement with a scarred face to present to the third prince, and it was likely that Richard Lancaster himself would proactively beg the emperor to annul the engagement without Chancellor Carter having to say anything. Thinking about how his long-laid plans had finally come to fruition, and that he had also unintentionally gained a beautiful and easily controlled wife like Olivia Carter, Mordecai Vane couldn't help but feel so delighted that he chuckled to himself. "Madam promised you, and naturally, she will keep her word." Butler Darkwood smiled, took a stack of banknotes from his chest, held it up with his left hand. "These are all small denomination banknotes from the Fu Keng Bank, 100 taels each. There are 2,000 taels here, enough for you to spend for several years." Mordecai Vane was overjoyed and reached out to take the money, but unexpectedly, in Butler Darkwood's right hand, the hand that wasn't holding the banknotes, a dagger appeared, stabbing straight into Mordecai Vane's heart. "You," Mordecai Vane's eyes widened, pointing at Butler Darkwood. "I'm so sorry, Madam gave me this money as a benefit, instructing me to handle things cleanly." Butler Darkwood smiled sinisterly, pulled the dagger out of Mordecai Vane's heart, and shoved him to the ground. Looking at Mordecai Vane convulsing on the ground, he said with a laugh, "I really must thank you for luring the third miss out. During the Qingming and Zhongyuan festivals next year, I'll be sure to burn extra joss paper for you." Mordecai Vane convulsed for a while, gradually becoming still, his eyes wide open, filled with disbelief and resentment. "TSK, not bad looking, too bad he's a fool." Victor Darkwood looked at the unconscious Olivia Carter. Under the torchlight, her face appeared alluring, as if covered in a soft glow. Victor Darkwood's eyes roamed over her, a lewd smile spreading across his face. "Killing her now would be such a waste, let me have some fun first. At the general's residence, I only get to touch Miranda Nightshade, that half-baked old woman, it's suffocating me." After speaking, he reached out to pull Olivia Carter's clothes. But as his hand touched her collar, Olivia Carter seized it tightly. Olivia Carter's eyes flew open, her sharp gaze sending chills down one's spine. Her fingers pressed hard on a pressure point on Victor Darkwood's hand, instantly employing a special forces control technique, twisting both his arms behind his back. Then, she delivered a powerful kick to the back of his knees. Victor Darkwood crumpled to the ground with a thud, the knife in his hand clattering to the floor. "Unexpectedly, my stepmother, always so virtuous and gentle, has a shady relationship with you, Victor Darkwood." Olivia Carter chuckled, finally grasping Miranda Nightshade's weakness. "Third miss, what nonsense are you spouting? Release me at once." Butler Darkwood hadn't anticipated Olivia Carter's surprising strength, struggling in vain to break free. "Release you? How could I?" Olivia Carter feigned seriousness, saying, "You slept with my father's woman, and as his daughter, I naturally must avenge him." Butler Darkwood, disbelieving that Olivia Carter genuinely intended to avenge Chancellor Carter, angrily cursed, "You slut, I truly underestimated you. What do you want?" "I should be asking what you want." Olivia Carter's voice was soft, seductive as the sweetest whisper. "Butler Darkwood, tell me, how do you want to die? Who's in there?" A shout suddenly echoed from outside the city god temple. Olivia Carter instantly understood, the night patrol, likely noticing the light in the temple, worried about hidden enemies and came to investigate. Picking up Butler Darkwood's fallen dagger, she gave a cold laugh. "My apologies, Butler Darkwood, I haven't the time for you to choose, so I'll give you the most direct death." With that, the knife rose and fell, trailing a streak of crimson. The sharp blade sliced across Butler Darkwood's throat, blood spurting forward. Olivia Carter shoved Butler Darkwood's corpse aside, sparing no glance for Mordecai Vane's lifeless, unseeing eyes on the ground, and turned to flee towards the back of the city god temple. Soldiers had entered the temple, and just as she was about to be discovered, a rope dropped from the rafters above, wrapping around her waist and pulling her up into the shadows. As Olivia Carter was pulled onto the rafter, a masked man dressed in black embraced her. She startled but dared not move, only feeling her heart pounding rapidly. "Quickly, quickly, report to Master Quentin Ravenshaw, 2 bodies have been discovered here." The 2 night patrol soldiers, upon entering the city god temple, were immediately horrified by the sight of Victor Darkwood and Mordecai Vane's corpses. Too panicked to thoroughly search the temple, they left one man to guard the scene while the other rushed out to report. Olivia Carter looked into the masked man's eyes, silently mouthing, "What now?" The masked man blinked, then suddenly tightened his grip around her waist. She almost instinctively raised her leg to kick his groin. Fortunately, the masked man instantly held her close, using his qigong to swiftly evade the patrolman's sight, slipping out through the temple's back door. The 2 ran until they neared the city gates, where they saw Quentin Ravenshaw leading a troop of torch-bearing soldiers out from the city, heading towards the city god temple. "It seems entering the city tonight is impossible." Olivia Carter, observing the torchlight painting the city gates a fiery orange-red, furrowed her brow and spoke. "So, how about we rest here a bit and wait for daybreak before entering the city?" The masked man found a clean patch of grass, sat down, patted the spot next to him, and said to Olivia Carter, "There's no other choice." Olivia Carter sighed, walked over, and sat down beside the masked man, unable to stop herself from wondering what tricks that strange mother and daughter duo would pull tomorrow with her gone all night. "Why did you help me?" If it weren't for this person's swift action, she would have definitely been discovered by those 2 guards. "Because you're very interesting." The masked man chuckled softly. "I'm interesting?" Olivia Carter raised an eyebrow slightly. "People say that the 3rd daughter of Chancellor Carter's estate, Olivia Carter, is a natural-born fool, but I see that you're not only not foolish, but you're also a deadly assassin." The masked man shook his head. "Your knife strike was decisive, clearly someone accustomed to killing to be able to act without hesitation like that." He suddenly moved closer to Olivia Carter, his beautiful eyes narrowing slightly. "I'm really curious, why did 3rd Miss Carter's personality completely change after falling into the water? Could it be that you were pretending to be foolish before?" "Perhaps I hit my head when I fell into Moon Reflection Lake, and it cleared my mind." Olivia Carter didn't avoid his gaze, meeting the masked man's eyes directly. "And you, why were you on the rafters of the city god temple? Don't tell me you were sleepwalking." "I've been following you all along." The man admitted casually. "Who are you, and why are you following us?" Olivia Carter's expression turned slightly cold. "The reason I'm following you is still curiosity, as for who I am," the masked man chuckled. "Try to guess. If you guess correctly, I'll give you a big gift." "I'm not very interested in who you are." Olivia Carter snorted coldly. "Just don't interfere with my affairs." This masked man, who appeared so mysteriously and possessed such exceptional skills, made her wary. "Interfere? Are you afraid I'll interfere with some good deed of yours?" The masked man sneered. "Could it be that you're worried I'll ruin your marriage to the 3rd prince? If you want to ruin it, ruin it. I don't care." Olivia Carter feigned indifference, waving her hand dismissively. "Oh. Could it be that you also dislike the 3rd prince's lame leg and deafness?" Olivia Carter sensed a chill in the masked man's voice when he said this. She replied, slightly puzzled, what does his lame leg and deafness have to do with me? Whether he's a soaring dragon and dancing phoenix or a crippled deaf-mute, it doesn't have much to do with me. He and I are just strangers sooner or later. Why do you say that? Do you think I'd let someone confine me to a small princely estate? Olivia Carter smiled charmingly. In her past life, she had thought that after retiring from the army, she would travel to famous mountains and great rivers, enjoying the delicacies of the world. Now, reborn, this wish remained unchanged. The world is vast, I can go wherever I want. An imperial decree can't confine me, nor can he. Sooner or later, I'll abandon him. Abandon? The masked man's figure clearly stiffened. In your parlance, I suppose that means divorcing him. Olivia Carter declared decisively. Divorce? The man's posture stiffened further. That third prince truly has rotten luck to have encountered her. It's him who's unlucky to have me clinging to him. Olivia Carter laughed heartily. You've already called me the jinx, haven't you? Indeed, you are truly terrifying. The man looked up at her, and their eyes met in shared laughter. Olivia Carter suddenly felt a kinship with this masked man, who lacked the typical antiquated mindset of this era. They conversed merrily throughout the night, until the first rays of dawn crept in. Olivia Carter glanced towards the city gate and saw farmers carrying their early harvest into the city. It's already 3/4 past the hour of the tiger. I must be going, Olivia Carter turned to say, only to find the man vanished. She paused, then chuckled. How rude, leaving without a word. She stood up, brushed off the grass blades clinging to her clothes, and merged into the stream of early marketgoers entering the city. Just past the city gate, a carriage approached from the side and stopped before her. She saw a limping figure alight, who asked in surprise, Miss Carter, what a coincidence. Indeed, a coincidence. Where is His Highness the Third Prince headed? Olivia Carter halted her steps and greeted Richard Lancaster. #### Chapter 6, Escape and Return. I had a bit too much to drink last night at a friend's place outside the city. I'm on my way back to the manor. What about you? Richard Lancaster's smile was gentle. If not for his lame leg, he would truly be a dashing gentleman, a dragon among men. Olivia Carter felt a pang of regret inwardly, but replied, I'm also heading back to the manor. Then come with me in my carriage. It's still before dawn, and it's truly unsafe for a young lady like yourself. Richard Lancaster spoke warmly. All right then. Olivia Carter reluctantly agreed, but she appreciated that Richard Lancaster didn't inquire about her whereabouts. She found him to be genuinely considerate, his only flaw being his leg. Olivia Carter boarded Richard Lancaster's carriage. They rode together, yet remained silent throughout the journey. The atmosphere within the carriage grew increasingly stifling and awkward. Finally arriving at Chancellor Carter's manor, Olivia Carter thanked Richard Lancaster and practically fled the carriage. She found the atmosphere inside to be incredibly oppressive, even more so than when she lay in ambush in the graveyard in her past life. Upon reaching the back gate of Chancellor Carter's manor and stepping inside, she saw Chancellor Carter and Miranda Nightshade waiting in the courtyard, their faces grim. Where were you last night? Chancellor Carter demanded immediately. Nowhere in particular, just taking a stroll, Olivia Carter replied nonchalantly. Do you know that Quentin Ravenshaw came to our house last night? Chancellor Carter's face darkened. Butler Darkwood and Mordecai Vane are dead. What does their death have to do with me? Olivia Carter raised an eyebrow. Olivia Carter, the guards at the gate said they saw you fleeing with Mordecai Vane. This is defiance of the imperial decree. I feared the exposure of our family's secrets, so I specifically sent Butler Darkwood to retrieve you. But I never imagined you would be so heartless as to kill Butler Darkwood, and then, to cover up the truth, kill Mordecai Vane as well. Miranda. Nightshade pointed a finger almost touching Olivia Carter's face. Grief-stricken by the loss of her beloved, her heart bled, and she wished she could tear Olivia Carter to shreds. Olivia Carter chuckled softly, glancing at Chancellor Carter. "Father, do you truly believe a frail daughter like me could possibly kill two grown men?" "Well, Chancellor Carter hesitated, looking at Olivia Carter. Truthfully, Olivia Carter had been sheltered her entire life, afraid to even harm a chicken, let alone murder two grown men. Just one of them could easily crush her with a single hand. The idea of Olivia Carter killing them was utterly unbelievable. "You must have an accomplice," Miranda Nightshade exclaimed angrily. "An accomplice? You mean, like me?" The back door suddenly opened, and another figure entered. Chancellor Carter and Miranda Nightshade turned to see Richard Lancaster. "Your Highness, what are you doing here?" Chancellor Carter asked, surprised. He silently thanked his lucky stars that Richard Lancaster hadn't overheard anything. If the rumor of Olivia Carter eloping with Mordecai Vane spread, their entire family would be charged with treason. "Ah, Lady Carter spent last night conversing with me at my estate. I just escorted her back and discovered she'd left a jade hairpin in my carriage." With that, Richard Lancaster stepped forward and gently placed the jade hairpin he held into Olivia Carter's hair. Olivia Carter couldn't understand why Richard Lancaster was lying for her. The hairpin wasn't even hers. However, in the current situation, his testimony was a godsend. "You're lying. Mordecai Vane clearly told me he was eloping with Olivia Carter. And Butler Darkwood's 2,000 taels of silver are also missing," Miranda Nightshade blurted out in her anxiety. The moment the words left her mouth, she realized her mistake. Chancellor Carter's face had turned a ghastly green. "Mother, if Mordecai Vane told you he was eloping with me, why didn't you stop him?" Olivia Carter asked, a cold smile playing on her lips. "And how did you know Butler Darkwood had 2,000 taels of silver?" Miranda Nightshade stammered, unable to answer. Olivia Carter took a step closer. "Or did you intentionally let Mordecai Vane lure me away, giving Butler Darkwood the silver to kill me? When they failed to capture me and ran off with the silver, they were robbed and killed." Olivia Carter pressed, each step increasing Miranda Nightshade's panic. Her mind in turmoil, she couldn't utter a word, only stumbling backward. "Enough. This ends now." Chancellor Carter, with his sharp mind, understood. Even if Olivia Carter's words were mere speculation, Miranda Nightshade's expression spoke volumes. He couldn't believe Miranda Nightshade's incompetence had almost led them to commit a crime against the crown. "Ends now." Olivia Carter looked at Chancellor Carter with a cold laugh. "Father, you know better than I do the punishment for instigating the abduction of a royal consort." Lin Ni. Chancellor Carter glanced at Richard Lancaster, who looked bewildered throughout the entire ordeal. He quickly pulled Olivia Carter aside. "Your mother was wrong this time. Please forgive her. Otherwise, we'll all be in serious trouble." "I'll forgive her," Olivia Carter said, a sly smile playing on her lips. "But on one condition." "Tell me." With his future on the line, Chancellor Carter had to silence Olivia Carter, even if Richard Lancaster remained clueless. "I want the 20 shops in the south of the city." Olivia Carter's eyes gleamed. "What do you say?" "Fine." Chancellor Carter gritted his teeth and agreed, looking at Olivia Carter casually twirling a strand of her hair. "Then please have someone bring the land deeds and account books for those 20 shops to me later, Father." Although she couldn't touch Miranda Nightshade, Olivia Carter was still quite pleased to have swindled 20 shops from Chancellor Carter. Turning back, she addressed Richard Lancaster, "Let me see your Highness out." "All right." Richard Lancaster maintained his uncomprehending expression as he followed Olivia Carter out the back door. "My lord." Miranda Nightshade looked at Chancellor Carter, tears streaming down her face. But Chancellor Carter didn't even spare her another glance, flicking his sleeve dismissively as he walked directly into his study. Learning that Olivia Carter was not only safe and sound but had also acquired 20 profitable shops as a dowry, Evelyn Carter nearly died of anger. Those 20 shops, originally promised by Miranda Nightshade as Evelyn's dowry, had now fallen into Olivia Carter's hands. She ran to Miranda Nightshade's courtyard, wailing and causing a commotion. That very day, Miranda Nightshade fell ill. Chancellor Carter, true to his word, delivered the deeds and account books for the 20 shops just after noon. Olivia Carter, in high spirits, rewarded Alara Moonstone with a beautiful set of jewelry. Remembering how Richard Lancaster had helped her that morning, she decided she had to repay him somehow. She first sent an invitation, asking Richard Lancaster to dine with her the next day at the Tai Ko Lau restaurant in the capital. That day, disguised as a young gentleman, she waited early in a private room on the second floor of Tai Ko Lau. Richard Lancaster didn't keep her waiting long and arrived promptly. However, aside from their initial greetings, they remained mostly silent throughout the meal. Olivia Carter once again felt the stifling, heavy atmosphere that had pervaded the carriage the day before. Finally, as the meal concluded and she could bear it no longer, she was about to excuse herself when Richard Lancaster spoke first with a smile. "You've treated me to such a lavish meal, I should reciprocate." "No need, no need. I simply wanted to thank you for helping me yesterday." Olivia Carter desperately wished she could quickly send Richard Lancaster on his way. She truly couldn't stand the oppressive silence. "Is being with me so tedious?" Richard Lancaster asked, a sudden sadness in his voice. "No, of course not." Seeing Richard Lancaster's hurt expression, Olivia Carter couldn't bring herself to leave. She was usually ruthless to her adversaries, but she couldn't be heartless to those who had helped her. After all, Richard Lancaster had helped her 3 times. Even their marriage arrangement was ultimately due to him being implicated because of her. "That's good then." Richard Lancaster's smile was like a spring breeze, carrying a gentle warmth. "We're about to be married, and I haven't given you anything yet. Across the street is Zhen Baofuang, Treasure Ward. Choose something you like, and I'll gift it to you. How about that?" "All right." Olivia Carter couldn't refuse. She immediately stood up and followed Richard Lancaster out of Tai Ko Lau, heading towards Treasure Ward. Just as they entered Treasure Ward, a sneer echoed, "Oh, third brother, what a coincidence. Are you also here choosing a birthday gift for father?" The speaker was 6th Prince Theodore Lancaster. Olivia Carter then remembered that the Emperor's birthday was approaching. It seemed Theodore Lancaster was here to select a birthday gift for the Emperor. "Oh, isn't this third miss of the Chancellor Carter household, the one who dragged her second sister into the lake?" Theodore Lancaster, seeing Olivia Carter beside Richard Lancaster, scoffed, "The two of you, one a cripple, the other a fool, are also here to buy antiques. Do you even have an eye for these things? Be careful not to be swindled, ha ha ha." Seeing Theodore Lancaster's smug, arrogant face, while Richard Lancaster remained oblivious to the insult, Olivia Carter, unable to contain her anger, immediately stepped forward to stand beside Richard Lancaster, looking at Theodore Lancaster with a hint of challenge. "Your Highness, are you certain your eye for these things is better than mine? If my eye is worse than yours, you renowned fool of the Eastern Victory Kingdom, I'll personally jump into Moon Reflection Lake." Faced with Olivia Carter's challenge, Theodore Lancaster's anger flared. How could he endure being looked down upon by a fool? "All right." Olivia Carter clapped her hands and laughed. "How about we make a wager? Whoever loses jumps into Moon Reflection Lake in the Imperial Garden on the Emperor's birthday." "Fine." Theodore Lancaster laughed angrily, immediately agreeing. "What are the stakes?" "I hear that Abbot Faven of the Grand General Temple is an expert in antiquities. We'll go to West Market Mouth, each choose an item from the antiques there, then go to the Grand General Temple and have Abbot Faven appraise them. How about that?" Olivia Carter suggested with a smile. "All right. Let's go now." Theodore Lancaster, impulsive as ever, wanted to leave the treasure pavilion immediately. Wait! Richard Lancaster interrupted. What? Third brother afraid of losing? Theodore Lancaster sneered. No, it's just that Lynn is representing me in this wager. If she loses, I will be responsible for fulfilling the bet. Richard Lancaster looked at Olivia Carter, his smile gentle as water. Olivia Carter was momentarily stunned, then heard Theodore Lancaster's mocking voice. Fine, I didn't know third brother was such a chivalrous gentleman. If you want to jump into Moon Reflection Lake, I'll let you. #### Chapter 7, taking the plunge for him. West Market Mouth in the Eastern Victory Kingdom's capital was no different from Panjiayuan in 21st century Beijing. Both sides of the street were lined with stalls selling old and antique goods, real and fake mixed together. A discerning eye was truly needed to avoid being cheated. As soon as Theodore Lancaster arrived at West Market Mouth, he rushed to the stalls to search for items. Olivia Carter, however, was not in a hurry. She approached Richard Lancaster and asked softly, "Tell me, aren't you afraid I'll lose?" Jumping into Moon Reflection Lake during the Emperor's birthday celebration was no laughing matter, especially for princes like Richard Lancaster and Theodore Lancaster. Those who didn't understand the situation might think they were expressing dissatisfaction with the Emperor. "It's all right, I can handle losing." Richard Lancaster, seemingly unaware of the gravity of jumping into Moon Reflection Lake, smiled reassuringly at Olivia Carter. "Don't look at my legs like that. I'm a good swimmer, I won't drown." Olivia Carter dejectedly touched her nose, thinking that she hadn't initially cared, but now she really couldn't afford to lose carelessly. She generously patted Richard Lancaster's shoulder, then walked towards the antique and second-hand stalls to look around. She hadn't found anything good yet when Theodore Lancaster, having already made several selections, held quite a few items, waiting to choose the best one later. "Is this the 9 Lords Offering Longevity by Grand Master Bai Shan from the Northern and Southern Dynasties?" Olivia Carter's eyes lit up as she spotted an ancient painting while browsing. "You have a keen eye, young lady," the stall owner said with a bright smile. "May I take a closer look?" "Lass, hold it tight and careful like. Don't smudge or tear it, now. This painting's got some years on it, delicate as a newborn babe." Olivia Carter took the painting from the stall owner, her eyes scanning the details. 9 monkeys, lively as you please, each clutching a big ol' peach, grinning like they was tryin' to sweet-talk their way out of trouble. A wealthy merchant down in Jiangnan, he owned this piece, the stall owner spun his yarn. Died, he did, and his 4 sons, they split the inheritance, but business ain't in their blood. Family fortune went down the drain, and this painting, well, it's on the market now. Lucky me, stumbled right into it. How much for this 9 Monkeys Offering Longevity painting? Olivia Carter asked, a smile playing on her lips. If this was the original, victory was hers. 100,000 taels of silver. The stall owner grinned, flashing all 10 fingers. "Don't balk at the price, missy. An original by Master Bai Shan, that's something you can't just find lying around." Steep, Olivia Carter winced, a frown creasing her brow. 100,000 taels, that was a year's profit from 20 of her shops. Lass, for a Master Bai Shan original, 100,000 taels ain't much at all. If it's too rich for your blood, well, then I'll just have to say sorry. The stall owner stroked his grizzled beard, a wide smile on his face. Before Olivia Carter could smooth out her frown, 2 hands snatched the 9 Monkeys Offering Longevity painting. The stall owner's face contorted in distress. "Careful there, sonny. Don't tear my painting. If it tears, I'll pay for it." Theodore Lancaster held the painting, his eyes flicking to Olivia Carter. "Third Miss Carter, if you can't afford it, don't touch it. This painting, I'm buying it." "Hold on." Olivia Carter blurted out, a surge of frustration rising within her. "I saw it first. But do you have the coin?" Theodore Lancaster sneered. Wanting ain't enough, you gotta be able to buy it. And don't think your third brother's gonna bail you out. Last time he stuck his neck out for you at the Imperial Flower Garden, he offended the Empress. She docked his pay for 6 months. He's probably so broke he's eating gruel every day. Olivia Carter gritted her teeth, fury simmering beneath the surface. The Empress's pettiness was astounding. Richard Lancaster had merely offered her his cloak and suggested she change her clothes, and the Empress had forced a betrothal upon them. And now, she was still making things difficult for him. It was a stark reminder of the challenges Richard Lancaster faced within the royal court. 100,000 taels. I can manage that without Third Highness's help. Olivia Carter declared, her voice laced with determination. She would not let Theodore Lancaster win. Too late. Little 4, the money. Theodore Lancaster snapped his fingers, and a young servant produced a banknote for 100,000 taels, handing it to the stall owner. The stall owner beamed, his eyes no longer acknowledging Olivia Carter's presence. I won't lose to you. Olivia Carter tossed her sleeve, her gaze sweeping across the other stalls. Theodore Lancaster, clutching his prize, felt victory within his grasp. He trailed Olivia Carter, deliberately buying anything she showed interest in. By the end of their market stroll, Olivia Carter's hands were empty, while Theodore Lancaster's were laden with purchases. So, third Miss Carter, still looking? Theodore Lancaster taunted, his voice dripping with amusement. He had money to burn, after all. Humph, no matter how much you snatch from me, I already secured a piece beforehand. Olivia Carter sneered. Fine, then let's go to Master Faven and have him decide who the real winner is today. Theodore Lancaster knew there couldn't be anything good at the West Market. If there were any truly high-quality items, they would have already been at Jinbao Pavilion. This, 9 Monkeys Offering Longevity, painting was already an unexpected delight, and he didn't believe Olivia Carter could find anything to beat him. He looked at Richard Lancaster with a smug grin. Third brother, it seems you'll definitely be taking a dip in Moon Reflection Lake on grandfather's birthday. Don't worry, I told you, I'm a very good swimmer. Seeing Olivia Carter's frustrated expression, Richard Lancaster comforted her. It's not over yet, Olivia Carter gritted her teeth. You really won't shed a tear until you see the coffin, Theodore Lancaster said, shaking his head smugly. The group headed to the Great Xianghua Temple. It happened to be a day without any major Buddhist ceremonies for Master Faven to preside over, so he received them in the parlor behind the temple. Theodore Lancaster first recounted their wager, then took out the 9 Monkeys Offering Longevity painting and presented it to Master Faven. Master Faven accepted the ancient painting, glanced at it, then smiled and asked Olivia Carter, what has the female benefactor brought? This jade cup. Olivia Carter smiled, pulling a grayish-blue jade cup from her sleeve and handing it to Master Faven. Her expression had returned to one of calm composure. Humph, just a broken cup. You think you can beat me with that? Theodore Lancaster scoffed. Master Faven took the cup, his eyes instantly lighting up. After examining it closely for a moment, he smiled and declared, the female benefactor has won. What? Theodore Lancaster's eyes widened in disbelief. Master, are you sure? This is a famous work by Master Baishan, the 9 Monkeys Offering Longevity. Your Highness jests. While this is indeed the 9 Monkeys Offering Longevity, it is not a work by Master Baishan. Master Faven chuckled. The fur strokes on the monkeys in Master Baishan's paintings are bold and strong, while the fur in this painting is too soft. It's clearly a later imitation. However, judging by its age, it's likely from the previous dynasty. You tricked me. Theodore Lancaster glared furiously at Olivia Carter. Your Highness, even if this 9 Monkeys Offering Longevity were genuine, you would still have lost, Master Faven said, shaking his head. Why? Theodore Lancaster couldn't believe it, his face etched with confusion. Benefactor, this jade cup is made of Xiao Yen jade, originating from the Yin Shang period. As soon as Master Faven finished speaking, Theodore Lancaster froze. The Yin Shang period? Indeed. When King Zhou of Shang built his wine pool and meat forest and erected the Deer Terrace, he had 7 jade cups and a jade pitcher made for Daji, called the 7 Stars. This Xiao Yen jade cup is one of them. It's a pity that only this one remains. If a complete set could be assembled, its value would be immeasurable. Master Faven sighed. So you picked this cup out early on, deliberately making a big show so I'd fight you for that fake painting. Theodore Lancaster's face flushed with anger. Suddenly remembering something, he ordered his attendant to bring all the items he had won from Olivia Carter and present them to Master Faven for inspection. As a result, 9 out of 10 were counterfeit, and the few genuine ones held no significant collector's value. You bitch, you dare trick me. Theodore Lancaster seethed, recalling how Olivia Carter had swindled him out of tens of thousands of taels of silver today. I refuse to accept this. Refuse to accept it? Then we can seek His Majesty's judgment. Olivia Carter sneered, by the way, Your Highness, perhaps you can explain to His Majesty your extravagant spending, tens of thousands of taels at a time. Where does all that money come from? I'm truly curious how Your Highness earns so much. Theodore Lancaster's face paled. Olivia Carter had hit a nerve. He dared not go before the Emperor and admit he'd spent tens of thousands of taels of silver on a pile of fakes. Most of that money came from bribes. Our appointment at Moon Reflection Lake, I trust Your Highness hasn't forgotten. I shall be waiting at the lakeside pavilion with a welcoming cup of wine. Olivia Carter smiled gently. Don't get cocky. Unable to best Olivia Carter, Theodore Lancaster turned his attention to Richard Lancaster, 3rd brother. Do you dare wager with me again? I don't gamble, but if my betrothed wishes to wager with you, I won't object. Richard Lancaster smiled, looking at Olivia Carter. Since when has 3rd brother become so useless as to rely on a woman for support? Theodore Lancaster taunted. 3rd Highness isn't like you, 6th Highness, so consumed by frivolous pursuits that he's lost all ambition. Naturally, he wouldn't understand such things. Olivia Carter chuckled, What's the matter, 6th Highness, afraid of losing to me again? Fine. I'll wager with you. He glared at Olivia Carter, but pointed at Richard Lancaster, we'll wager on our princely titles. The loser will personally petition father to be removed from the imperial registry and reduced to commoner status. Agreed. Richard Lancaster didn't wait for Olivia Carter to respond before accepting. Olivia Carter laughed coldly, such a high-stakes wager from 6th Highness is truly admirable. Let's just hope you don't regret it. This time, I absolutely will not lose to you. Theodore Lancaster was determined to regain face against Olivia Carter and Richard Lancaster. What shall we wager this time? Olivia Carter asked coldly. Jade. Theodore Lancaster sneered, the Heavenly Treasures Pavilion just received a shipment of raw jadeite from Western Burma. Tomorrow, we'll go there and see who has the keener eye. 3 rounds will determine the victor. Agreed. Olivia Carter clapped her hands in agreement, let's just hope Your Highness doesn't lose too badly. Otherwise, without your princely status, you won't be able to enter the Imperial Garden to jump into Moon Reflection Lake. I'd lose such an entertaining spectacle. Don't you get cocky. Hashtag Chapter 8, The Jade Wager. The Heavenly Treasures Pavilion in the Eastern Victory Kingdom was renowned as the #1 establishment under heaven. It offered no shortage of wine, women, wealth, and wonders. Anything you could imagine, the Heavenly Treasures Pavilion could provide. Its patrons were mostly wealthy merchants, nobles, and royalty. Inside the Heavenly Treasures Pavilion, there were games of chance, dice, cockfights, dog races, and even a black market arena. In the past couple of years, jade gambling had become increasingly popular. The saying, One cut to poverty, one cut to riches, one cut to rags, had become the motto of this game. Many merchants traveled thousands of miles from western Burma, bringing with them loads of raw jadeite, seeking wealthy patrons at the Heavenly Treasures Pavilion to sell at high prices. There were also those who came to test their luck, hoping to uncover a beautiful gem and transform their lives overnight. On the appointed day, Theodore Lancaster arrived early at the second-floor room of the Thien Not Kak. Yesterday's defeat against Olivia Carter had angered him to the point of a sleepless night. But at the same time, he regretted his impulsive wager. If he lost, he would lose everything. News of his bet with Richard Lancaster had somehow leaked, causing the Thien Not Kak to be overcrowded with onlookers today. Apart from the Crown Prince, occupied with court affairs, all the other princes were present, and even the ministers, currently on holiday, were in their seats. This wasn't just to witness the spectacle between the two princes, but also because it was rumored that Richard Lancaster's representative in this gamble was none other than third Miss Carter of the Chancellor Carter household, the one famed for her foolishness since birth. To lose to a fool in front of everyone would be a great humiliation. As a precaution, Theodore Lancaster had specially invited several gemstone experts to assist him, determined to seize Richard Lancaster's princely title. Olivia Carter and Richard Lancaster arrived a little later. Olivia Carter, still in her scholarly attire, was startled to see the Thien Not Kak overflowing with people inside and out. "Do you commoners all enjoy watching royal affairs like this?" she asked. "A large crowd makes for good witnesses, doesn't it?" Richard Lancaster smiled. As soon as they appeared, the crowd parted, allowing them to pass. Upon entering the Thien Not Kak hall, they saw 3 long rosewood tables laden with various sizes of rough stones, awaiting Richard Lancaster and Olivia Carter's selection. Theodore Lancaster had already asked the gemstone experts to pre-select 3 rough stones based on their outer layer's color. With their assistance today, he felt much more confident. Seeing Olivia Carter enter, he called out, "Third Miss Carter has finally arrived. I thought you and third brother were too afraid to come. Third Miss Carter, tell me, if you cause third brother to lose his princely title before you're even married, what a laughingstock you'll both become." A collective gasp swept through the crowd at his words. No one expected that Richard Lancaster and Theodore Lancaster had wagered a princely title. "Sixth brother, isn't this a bit excessive?" Second Prince Raphael Lancaster frowned. "What's the worry? Third brother isn't even afraid of losing, so what's the problem?" Theodore Lancaster laughed loudly. "Third brother, it's not too late to back out now." Olivia Carter looked towards Richard Lancaster, who turned back and reassured her with a smile, "Just bet with him. It's all right." All eyes were now on Olivia Carter, eager to see how the naturally foolish third miss would fare against the sixth prince. Though dressed in scholarly garb, Olivia Carter's beautiful face was undeniably feminine. She smiled faintly, walked to the 3 long tables, closed her eyes, and ran her hands over the rough stones, slowly feeling each one, finally tapping them lightly with her fingers. "Does this third Miss Carter even know how to choose?" someone in the crowd asked doubtfully. Gemstone gambling relied on 3 factors: discerning eyes, courage, and luck, with discerning eyes being the most important. But Olivia Carter was feeling the stones with her eyes closed, like a blind person crossing a river. And she was tapping them. Were these stones like watermelons, with different sounds for ripe and unripe? Would raw stones containing good jade and poor jade also produce different sounds? "Lady Carter, you're touching them with your eyes closed. Do you think the good jade will announce itself?" Yesterday, Olivia Carter had displayed her talent in antique appraisal, and Theodore Lancaster was worried she possessed the same sharp eye for jade gambling. But now, it seemed she was completely clueless. "You're right, they do announce themselves." Olivia Carter opened her eyes, smiled at Theodore Lancaster, and selected 3 raw stones. These 3. Theodore Lancaster didn't know that although Olivia Carter had been in special forces in her past life, her grandfather was an antique appraisal expert. Having learned from him since childhood, she'd picked up some jade selection techniques. Touch, listen, look were the 3 steps her grandfather always followed before choosing jade. Good jade usually has a smooth texture and produces a clear, resonant sound. It also feels cooler to the touch than lower quality stones. Third brother, are you sure you want to let her choose these 3? Theodore Lancaster looked at the 3 raw stones Olivia Carter seemed to have picked randomly, almost sympathetically asking Richard Lancaster. Richard Lancaster simply smiled and nodded, completely unconcerned about his princely title being at stake. This absolute trust from Richard Lancaster surprised Olivia Carter. She thought this third prince, who followed her lead without question, trusting her to this extent, despite being a man of few words, wasn't so bad. Too much talk would only annoy her, like the 6th prince in front of her, grinning like a big drake. Third brother, are you really not going to reconsider? Second Prince Raphael Lancaster couldn't help but advise. Cut these 3 stones open. Richard Lancaster said simply. All right. Theodore Lancaster clapped his hands loudly. Someone, bring all 3 stones chosen by Lady Carter and myself to be cut. While waiting for the stones to be cut, Olivia Carter and Richard Lancaster went up to Theodore Lancaster's VIP room on the 2nd floor, eating and drinking while overlooking the 6 raw stones being processed below. Soon, all 6 stones were cut. Everyone who saw the results couldn't help but gasp in admiration. All 6 raw stones, in terms of color, clarity, and quality, were top grade, making it difficult to determine a winner, resulting in a tie. Seems like it's a draw today. Olivia Carter raised her glass towards Theodore Lancaster. Your Highness, today both you and the 3rd prince have kept your princely titles. But don't forget our appointment at Moon Reflection Lake during the Emperor's birthday celebration next month. Olivia Carter's reminder darkened Theodore Lancaster's face. He slammed the table and stood up abruptly. No, I must settle this with you today. Your Highness, do you really want to make such a big deal out of this? Olivia Carter's expression turned cold. What? Are you afraid? Theodore Lancaster narrowed his eyes. Olivia Carter snorted. Today's tie was the best outcome. Regardless of whether Richard Lancaster or Theodore Lancaster won or lost, the one who would ultimately suffer the most would undoubtedly be her. For one of the princes to be demoted to a commoner because of her gamble would only further displease the emperor, who would see it as her disrespecting the royal family's dignity. But if Theodore Lancaster really insisted on forcing the issue, Olivia Carter wasn't necessarily afraid of the Dragon Throne's wrath in the Golden Lone Palace. Then I invite His 6th Highness to choose first. All right, splendid. Theodore Lancaster stood up, signaling with his eyes to the gambling experts he had invited. Immediately, the gazes of those few people focused on the largest raw stone on the 3 long tables. I choose this one. Theodore Lancaster, understanding the cue, stepped forward and placed his hand on that raw stone. Olivia Carter chuckled coldly, also stood up and went downstairs, walked to the long table, and placed her hand on a slightly smaller raw stone. I choose this one. Someone. Theodore Lancaster called out loudly, cut the stones. This time, neither of them went up to the 2nd floor private room, but stood right in the main hall, watching the 2 skilled craftsmen slowly cut the 2 raw stones. Theodore Lancaster's eyes were glued to the raw stone he had chosen, his face gradually turning pale. The raw stone, after being cut, not only had a gray base and poor jade quality, but also contained many impurities. On the contrary, the stone Olivia Carter chose revealed a green jade gem, like dripping water, with excellent jade quality, causing everyone around to gasp in astonishment. It's truly an imperial green. Your 6th Highness, a bet is a bet. Olivia Carter looked coldly at Theodore Lancaster. In the first round, she deliberately tied with Theodore Lancaster, giving him a way out, but he didn't know how to appreciate it. Before choosing the 3 raw stones, she had noticed this small, inconspicuous raw stone. Based on years of experience, she knew that Theodore Lancaster's 3 raw stones definitely couldn't produce good jade material, so she chose 3 raw stones comparable to his. It's best to leave a way out, so it's easier to meet again later. But Theodore Lancaster didn't know what's good for him, so she didn't need to hold back anymore. This, Theodore Lancaster stammered, pointing at the imperial green jade, how can this be? Now, your 6th Highness can enter the palace to request an edict, voluntarily lowering yourself to commoner status. Olivia Carter sneered, looking at Theodore Lancaster's horrified face. No, this doesn't count. You're a fool, how could you know how to choose raw stones? You must have cheated. Theodore Lancaster said frantically. How could he give up his princely status? Moreover, if the emperor knew that he had lost his princely position due to a gambling loss, with the emperor's fury, he would never have a day of peace. In front of so many people, does your 6th Highness want to play tricks? Don't forget, you were the one who proposed the terms of this wager. Olivia Carter sneered, slowly approaching Theodore Lancaster, saying each word deliberately. The tie just now was because I intentionally gave you a step, but you wanted to escalate things to this extent. Yesterday's karma, today's consequences, your highness chose this yourself, so you must bear it yourself. No, I don't want to. I am the dignified 6th prince. Theodore Lancaster retreated in fear, step by step, until his back hit the large pillar of the main hall. The surrounding people all felt that Theodore Lancaster's actions were truly unsightly, everyone pointing and whispering about him. Several other princes even showed clear disdain, truly not taking Theodore Lancaster seriously. Olivia Carter's face was full of contempt, about to force Theodore Lancaster to admit defeat. But just at this moment, a loud shout came from the entrance of the First Heaven Pavilion. An imperial edict arrives, 3rd Prince Richard Lancaster, receive the edict. Everyone promptly knelt in astonishment. Richard Lancaster hobbled down from the 2nd floor to receive the imperial edict. Just as he knelt, the head eunuch read the edict aloud. By the mandate of heaven, the emperor decrees, the 3rd Prince, Richard Lancaster, not only fails to make progress but also instigated the 6th Prince, Theodore Lancaster, to gamble, even wagering the princely title bestowed upon him by me. Such foolishness is unbearable. Richard Lancaster is hereby sentenced to 7 days of confinement for self-reflection, and to copy the doctrine of the mean 100 times. Let it be known, Theodore Lancaster clearly proposed the wager, so why is Richard Lancaster being blamed? Hashtag Chapter 9, Double the Payback. After seeing off the eunuch who delivered the edict, Olivia Carter carefully observed the expressions of the princes present. The wager was initiated by Theodore Lancaster himself, so he wouldn't dare be the first to sneakily report it to the emperor. Richard Lancaster had always been excluded from court politics and didn't participate in factional disputes, so the officials present couldn't possibly submit a memorial to accuse him based on this incident. Then, the only ones who could exploit this matter and blow it out of proportion were the other princes. Richard Lancaster was already considered a cripple, with no chance of ascending the throne, so why would anyone still target him and try to suppress him so relentlessly? What about him made others so wary? Olivia Carter couldn't figure it out, but every time she thought about how Richard Lancaster, already disabled and constantly subjected to verbal abuse, was still being targeted and oppressed, she couldn't help but feel heartbroken. Ha, 3rd brother, did you hear what father said? We're not allowed to use our princely titles as wagers, so this bet doesn't count. Theodore Lancaster jumped up and laughed loudly at Richard Lancaster as soon as the eunuch left. Richard Lancaster held the imperial edict, only smiling faintly without replying, but Olivia Carter felt indignant on his behalf. She stepped forward, stared at Theodore Lancaster, and said, I can overlook today's wager, but don't forget our agreement at Moon Reflection Lake, Your Highness. Otherwise, I have plenty of ways to make you keep your promise. I won't forget. Theodore Lancaster's face darkened, and he gritted his teeth at Olivia Carter. But don't get cocky, 3rd Miss Carter. No one has ever gotten the better of me. I will repay this humiliation twice over. I'll be waiting. Olivia Carter glanced at him indifferently and, in full view of everyone, took Richard Lancaster's hand and walked out with him. Everyone was stunned. After all, Eastern Victory Kingdom placed great importance on propriety between men and women. Boys and girls shouldn't even sit at the same table after the age of 7. In broad daylight, if unmarried men and women dared to publicly hold hands and display intimacy, they would certainly be mercilessly criticized. However, Richard Lancaster and Olivia Carter, though unmarried, were a well-known betrothed couple, so for a moment, no one knew how to react. Olivia Carter continued to hold Richard Lancaster's hand as they strode out of everyone's sight, while Theodore Lancaster's gaze followed Olivia Carter like a shadow. Only after she was gone did he let out a cold snort and leave with his entourage. Why didn't you go to the palace and explain to His Majesty that you didn't instigate this? Olivia Carter asked, sitting in Richard Lancaster's carriage. Does it matter? The edict has been issued. Even if I explain, Father will only offer a few words of comfort. He can't slap himself in the face by retracting the edict. Richard Lancaster smiled faintly. But this way, his image in His Majesty's eyes will worsen, is that all right? Olivia Carter frowned in confusion. Even though Richard Lancaster had no affinity for the throne and wasn't involved in factional disputes, he should still consider his own future. If he didn't take advantage of his current predicament to gain the emperor's sympathy and secure some benefits, then after the new emperor ascended the throne, given the crown prince's personality, Richard Lancaster's situation might be even more dire. Does that matter to you? Richard Lancaster looked intently into Olivia Carter's eyes. If I forever remain unloved by my father, forever without power, would you still be willing to marry me? Tell me honestly, if you don't want to, I have a way to annul this engagement. Then are you willing to marry me? Olivia Carter returned his serious gaze. An unfavored second daughter of Chancellor Carter's household, unable to bring you any benefit or support. I am willing. Richard Lancaster took Olivia Carter's hand and gently kissed the back of it. Olivia Carter's face flushed slightly. The spot where Richard Lancaster's lips had touched felt as if it were burning, the heat intensifying and spreading to the depths of her heart. I agree as well. She quickly withdrew her hand as if to conceal her reaction. After alighting from the carriage, she turned back to Richard Lancaster. If I didn't agree, I also have a way to break off this engagement. Good. Remember your words today, and never regret them. Richard Lancaster nodded, drawing the carriage curtains and severing their eye contact. Olivia Carter stood at the back gate of Chancellor Carter's residence, watching Richard Lancaster's carriage disappear into the dust and haze. She didn't quite understand the meaning of his last words. But she truly wanted to marry Richard Lancaster, not out of love, but because he was her stepping stone out of Chancellor Carter's household. Only by leaving Chancellor Carter's household could she truly and completely control her substantial dowry. And eventually, she would leave Richard Lancaster to seek her own world, free from any constraints. Richard Lancaster spent 7 days in contemplation. Olivia Carter also remained quietly within her courtyard for 7 days, never venturing out. On the 7th day, momentous event occurred that sent Evelyn Carter into a frenzy of delight. Evelyn Carter was chosen by the Empress, betrothed to the Crown Prince, and a wedding date was set for her to become his secondary consort. After days of longing, her wish had finally been granted. Evelyn Carter wanted nothing more than to run through the streets, proclaiming to everyone that she was soon to be the Crown Prince's secondary consort. Not to mention, she had visited Olivia Carter's courtyard countless times throughout the day to flaunt her good fortune and lord it over her. During dinner, Evelyn Carter shot a meaningful glance at Chancellor Carter. Chancellor Carter looked at Evelyn Carter and Miranda Nightshade, seeing the coercive looks in both their eyes. He could only clear his throat and say, Lin Ni, I've been thinking. Your dowry is already quite substantial. You don't need those 20 shops anymore. Am I not your daughter? Olivia Carter raised an eyebrow. Why would you say such a thing? When elder sister married, her betrothal gifts amounted to 128 chests filled with funds from the treasury, not to mention the estates and shops. Why is it that when it's my turn, my entire dowry must come from my mother's inheritance, and now even the 20 shops you added are being taken back? Olivia Carter scoffed. Aren't you afraid of gossip, of people saying you favor one daughter over another, that you and my stepmother mistreat me? You rotten wench, how dare you speak to me like that? Miranda Nightshade slammed the table, stood up, pointed directly at Olivia Carter's nose, and scolded, aren't you relying on the third prince to brazenly steal those 20 shops? And now you dare to say we mistreated you. Miranda Nightshade was currently relying on the fact that her daughter was about to marry into the crown prince's residence. Although the official wife was of the second rank and the concubine was only of the third rank, with the crown prince's power, Evelyn Carter would undoubtedly outrank Olivia Carter. Therefore, she and Evelyn Carter had the audacity to pressure Chancellor Carter to reclaim the 20 shops originally intended for Olivia Carter. Mother, have you truly never mistreated me? Olivia Carter asked with a gentle smile. Then, when I was 7, in the winter, who poured ice water on me and made me stand in the freezing wind for a whole hour? When I was 10, who, dissatisfied with my service, directly splashed hot water on me? The burn scar on my thigh is still there. Would you like to see it, Mother? When I was 12, just because I secretly tried on second sister's new clothes, who beat me with a wooden stick until I was covered in blood? Every word Olivia Carter spoke was calm, yet it horrified those who heard it. Miranda Nightshade stammered, unable to speak, while Chancellor Carter was stunned. Although he had never valued this daughter, who was born foolish, he never imagined that she had suffered such cruel treatment. As Chancellor Carter, the head of all officials, if word spread that his household was disharmonious and that he mistreated his daughter, how could he maintain his dignity and serve the nation? He immediately turned and glared furiously at Miranda Nightshade. I entrusted you with managing the household, and this is how you manage it. Not to mention that Linger is my daughter, if someone were to bear me a son in the future, wouldn't you harm him to death as well? My lord, I didn't. Miranda Nightshade's face paled in panic. She grabbed the hot bowl of soup from the table and threw it directly at Olivia Carter, shouting, didn't you say I mistreated you? Today, I'll make this accusation clear. Fortunately, Olivia Carter dodged quickly, and only her dress was slightly splashed with soup. If that hot bowl of soup had landed on her head, her beautiful face would have been completely ruined. Mother, I originally wanted to save you some face, but it's a pity that you keep pushing me. Olivia Carter glanced coldly at Miranda Nightshade, took a silk handkerchief from her sleeve, and turned to Chancellor Carter. Father, half a month ago, I accidentally picked up this handkerchief in the courtyard. Please take a look. Chancellor Carter didn't understand why Olivia Carter suddenly mentioned the handkerchief. He took it and looked at it, and Miranda Nightshade's face immediately turned pale. In the bottom left corner of the handkerchief were embroidered the 2 words, Victor Darkwood. Isn't that Butler Darkwood's name? Chancellor Carter frowned. Butler Darkwood is dead. Aren't you afraid of bringing me bad luck by giving me this handkerchief? Father, please look closely at the embroidery, Olivia Carter said with a smile, and then compare it with the things Mother has embroidered for you, and you will understand what I mean. Chancellor Carter's expression changed repeatedly. He quickly took out the handkerchief embroidered for him by Miranda Nightshade and compared it. Sure enough, the stitching was identical. The relationship between Miranda Nightshade and Butler Darkwood was self-evident. You've done a fine deed. He forcefully threw the silk handkerchief at Miranda Nightshade's face. No, my lord, I absolutely did not do it, this is a setup. Miranda Nightshade's face was filled with terror as she pointed at Olivia Carter and said, it's you must have found someone to forge my embroidery technique and embroidered this handkerchief to frame me. My lord, we've been husband and wife for over a decade, what does Victor Darkwood have that you don't? You must believe me. ###Chapter 10, self-deception. Chancellor Carter hesitated, unable to deny that Miranda Nightshade's words had struck a chord within him. Butler Darkwood was the son of his wet nurse, merely a servant. How could he compare to him? For him, the esteemed Chancellor Carter of the Imperial Court, to admit that his wife was having an affair with a servant, to admit that he was inferior to a butler, this was something he absolutely refused to accept. At this thought, Chancellor Carter's face hardened. He glared at Olivia Carter, and bellowed, "Someone, seize the third miss. She has shown disrespect to her parents, a grave act of defiance. Bring the family discipline rod and give her 20 lashes." This time, Olivia Carter truly hadn't expected Chancellor Carter to be so self-deceived. The truth was right in front of him, yet he still refused to suspect. Truly a fool. "If father doesn't believe me, just have Jasper's blood tested," Olivia Carter said coldly. It seemed Miranda Nightshade wouldn't shed a tear until she saw the coffin. She had to make everything clear. Jasper Carter was the only son Chancellor Carter had after nearly 30 years, and he was always cherished like a treasure. If this only son turned out to be a bastard born from Miranda Nightshade and Butler Darkwood's illicit affair, wouldn't his years of affection become a laughingstock? "Someone, gag the third miss and lock her in the woodshed. Do not release her." Chancellor Carter's face turned ashen as he gave the order. To think father is a cuckold who doesn't dare remove his horns, what a coward. Olivia Carter said angrily. She truly hadn't expected Chancellor Carter to be so stubborn. Several strong matrons stepped forward to tie up Olivia Carter, but just then, a servant ran in to report, "My lord, Quentin Ravenshaw and his Third Highness have come to visit." "Why are they coming at this hour?" Chancellor Carter frowned, glancing at Olivia Carter. Before he could react, Magistrate Quentin Ravenshaw, leading several constables along with Richard Lancaster, barged in. "Chancellor Carter." "Magistrate Ravenshaw, why are you leading men into my residence at this late hour?" Chancellor Carter asked, his face displeased as he looked at Magistrate Ravenshaw. "I am here because there has been a new development in the recent murder case of Butler Darkwood and your distant relative," Magistrate Ravenshaw replied. "I hope Chancellor Carter will allow me to search Butler Darkwood's room." "Oh. What development?" Chancellor Carter glanced at Olivia Carter. "We suspect this case is highly likely a crime of passion." "A crime of passion?" Chancellor Carter furrowed his brow. "Indeed." Magistrate Ravenshaw took out a baby bib and held it up in front of Chancellor Carter. "This was found on Butler Darkwood's person, embroidered with the word Miranda. I suspect Butler Darkwood and Mordecai Vane may have killed each other over this woman. I wonder if Chancellor Carter has any impression of this woman named Miranda." At this, Chancellor Carter's face immediately turned green. He was now bathed in a sickly light, truly unwilling to answer Magistrate Ravenshaw's question, for if he wasn't careful, the entire capital would know that Miranda Nightshade had cuckolded him. "Miranda is my mother's given name," Olivia Carter quickly answered in her stead. Hearing this, Magistrate Chu glanced at Chancellor Carter and Miranda Nightshade, his face full of awkwardness. Chancellor Carter turned, glaring fiercely at Miranda Nightshade, whose legs nearly gave way beneath her. Only Evelyn Carter remained at the dining table, completely stunned. She couldn't understand how the intent to pressure Olivia Carter into handing over 20 shops had transformed into a matter of her mother cuckolding her father. If this got out, with a mother like that, how could she ever show her face again? Would His Highness the Crown Prince cast her aside because of it? Olivia Carter observed Richard Lancaster, who had remained silent since his arrival. She couldn't fathom why, every time she found herself in a difficult situation, Richard Lancaster would appear just in time to help her, as if he were constantly monitoring her every move. "Carter, Chancellor Carter." Magistrate Chu stammered, unsure of what to say. Chancellor Carter, his face etched with weariness, waved a hand at him. "I'll have someone show you to Victor Darkwood's room." He didn't even bother with the title of butler. "And I expect Magistrate Chu to handle this matter discreetly." Investigating the case and uncovering that oversized green hat, perched atop the head of no less than the current Chancellor Carter, Magistrate Chu felt nothing but his own misfortune. He could only hope that Chancellor Carter would be magnanimous and not make things difficult for him later. Richard Lancaster didn't leave. He slowly walked to Olivia Carter's side, standing like a pillar, gazing at her tenderly. Chancellor Carter closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and then bellowed, "Bring the young master here." Master, what are you planning to do?" Jasper Carter was the apple of Miranda Nightshade's eye. Upon hearing these words, she immediately rushed forward and embraced Chancellor Carter's leg. "Master, it's all my fault, every bit of it. Punish me however you see fit, but please don't take your anger out on the child." "Chancellor." Carter kicked her away, his voice cold. "Someone, bring a bowl of clean water. I want to perform a blood test." "Father." As soon as Jasper Carter was brought in, he ran towards Chancellor Carter with a sweet smile, throwing himself into his arms. Chancellor Carter's eyes softened momentarily, but then turned icy cold as he looked away. The mere thought that the son he cherished as his own might belong to another man made him want to strike the boy dead. Once the clean water arrived, Chancellor Carter personally pricked his finger, letting a drop of blood fall into the bowl. "Someone, have the young master do the same." "No, I don't want to bleed, father. It hurts." "Mother, help me," Jasper Carter cried and screamed, complaining of pain, refusing to cooperate. Chancellor Carter strode forward in a rage and slapped the boy hard across the face. "Shut up. Behave yourself. Or I'll lock you in the woodshed." "Mother, mother." Jasper Carter no longer dared to struggle, only crying incessantly for Miranda Nightshade. Miranda Nightshade's heart ached at the sight, but she didn't dare to intervene, only watching helplessly as Jasper Carter's finger was pricked and a drop of blood fell into the bowl. In truth, she wasn't entirely certain who Jasper Carter's father was. When she was pregnant with him, she had indeed begun her clandestine affair with Butler Darkwood, but Chancellor Carter had also frequented her chambers during that time. Now, she could only pray that Jasper Carter was Chancellor Carter's son. Chancellor Carter stared fixedly at the 2 drops of blood in the bowl of water for a moment, then glanced impassively at Jasper Carter before walking towards Miranda Nightshade. Miranda Nightshade's heart pounded in her chest. My lord." Chancellor Carter suddenly kicked Miranda Nightshade hard in the stomach. She screamed in pain and collapsed to the floor. Chancellor Carter, without a word, proceeded to kick her 3 or 4 more times before speaking. "We've been husband and wife for over 10 years, and I've never mistreated you. Even though Amelia Roberts and Elara were your equals as wives, I never let them outrank you. I've never treated their daughters as well as I treated Junner. Tell me, why did you betray me?" He was about to kick her again when Evelyn Carter reacted, rushing forward to shield Miranda Nightshade. "Father," she cried, "there must be some mistake. You must believe mother." "Believe? How can I believe you? Look at those 2 drops of blood. They don't mix at all." Chancellor Carter stared suspiciously at Evelyn Carter. "Perhaps even you aren't my own daughter." "No, father. How could that be? I look just like you." Evelyn Carter's eyes widened in disbelief. She hadn't expected this to implicate her. If she wasn't the second miss of Chancellor Carter's estate, not his true daughter, then not only would the Crown Prince not want her, but she wouldn't even have a place in the Eastern Shin Kingdom. "Mother, say something. I am father's daughter, aren't I? You've never betrayed father, have you?" Evelyn Carter frantically shook Miranda Nightshade. Chancellor Carter's kicks had been brutal, and it took Miranda Nightshade a while to catch her breath. Tears streaming down her face, she looked at Chancellor Carter. "My lord, Junner truly is your daughter. When I was pregnant with her, I absolutely did nothing to betray you. So you admit that Jasper Carter isn't my son? You admit you betrayed me to conceive him?" Chancellor Carter asked coldly. The truth was undeniable. She could only nod, tears flowing freely. Someone. Confine Jasper Carter and Madam to her courtyard. Tell everyone she's ill and refuse all visitors. Chancellor Carter squeezed his eyes shut. Then, to Miranda Nightshade, he said, after our daughter's marriages, I will deal with you. Yes, sir. Two burly old women immediately stepped forward, each taking an arm of the prostrate Miranda Nightshade and leading her back to her courtyard. Another dragged the still-dazed Jasper Carter after them. Chancellor Carter swept a cold gaze over the remaining servants. If any of you breathe a word of this, I'll sell your entire families to the border as slaves. We understand, master. All the servants present knelt and responded in unison. Get out. Chancellor Carter flicked his sleeve, and the servants scrambled to leave. He hurried towards the servants' quarters, intending to silence Master Chu. No matter what, Miranda Nightshade had to be discarded, but not now. Not before Evelyn Carter married the Crown Prince. Currently, the court was divided between Crown Prince Frederick Lancaster and Second Prince Raphael Lancaster, their rivalry fierce. He had managed, with great difficulty, to marry his eldest daughter to the second prince, and now his second daughter was about to marry the Crown Prince. No matter who ascended the throne, his future was secure. Therefore, he absolutely couldn't let Miranda Nightshade's scandal ruin his meticulous plan. Chancellor Carter had just left, leaving only a distraught Evelyn Carter slumped on the floor of the Grand Hall, with Olivia Carter and Richard Lancaster coldly observing. The play is over. Allow me to escort your highness out, Olivia Carter said to Richard Lancaster with a gentle smile. Indeed, a rather interesting play, Richard Lancaster remarked as he and Olivia Carter left, abandoning Evelyn Carter on the floor. After walking a short distance, Olivia Carter lowered her voice and asked, Why is it that every time I encounter a difficult problem, your highness appears at the right moment to help me? These matters, though troublesome, she could have handled herself. However, Richard Lancaster's assistance made things considerably easier, and she couldn't help but feel grateful. I merely happened upon Quinton Ravenshaw and followed out of curiosity. Miss Carter is overthinking it, Richard Lancaster replied with a smile. However, are you certain there's no issue with the results of the blood test? Why does your highness ask? Olivia Carter responded, blinking playfully. Richard Lancaster didn't answer, his gaze fixed on Olivia Carter. When the bowl of clear water was brought forth, he noticed Olivia Carter's right middle finger twitch subtly, as if she had done something to the water. I'm surprised your highness is so observant. I did, in fact, employ a little trick with the water, Olivia Carter admitted with a smile. A bit of oil, some alum, and even blood of different lineages can mix. Conversely, with oil added, even blood of the same lineage won't mix. Then whose child is Jasper Carter, really? Richard Lancaster asked Olivia Carter directly. Who knows? I don't care whose child he is, she said with a shrug, her expression indifferent. I only needed this outcome, to make Miranda Nightshade lose Chancellor Carter's trust and be expelled from the manor. As for Jasper Carter, that child had caused her trouble more than once, relying on the favor of Miranda Nightshade and Chancellor Carter, though mostly instigated by Evelyn Carter. But for a child so young to know how to bully the weak and fear the strong, he needed a proper lesson, to experience the feeling of falling from grace, so he would learn his place. Chapter 11, attacked. A strange flicker crossed Richard Lancaster's brow, disappearing so quickly that it might have been a mere illusion before Olivia Carter could discern it. His expression returned to normal almost instantly. But I was able to help, wasn't I? A smile played in Richard Lancaster's eyes. Olivia Carter, though unsure of the meaning behind that smile, acknowledged the truth in his words with a slight nod. My father's birthday is in a few days. I'd like you to accompany me to the palace banquet. You won't refuse, will you? Though his tone was questioning, Olivia Carter's heart skipped a beat when she met Richard Lancaster's gaze. He certainly knew how to make a request, first mentioning his assistance and then asking for something in return. Olivia Carter felt as though she had fallen into a trap. Richard Lancaster continued, "As my future imperial consort, your attendance is expected. Unless, of course, you regret your decision to marry me. But don't forget what I asked you, and what you answered. You said you were willing." Olivia Carter's face flushed under Richard Lancaster's peculiar gaze. Lifting her chin, she declared, "I, Olivia Carter, always keep my word. It's just attending a banquet." "Fine, I'll go." Richard Lancaster seemed troubled, but preparing a gift for father is a headache. Every year it's the same, nothing new. He shook his head as he finished speaking. Olivia Carter chuckled, "If you want my help, just say it. Don't be shy." Richard Lancaster, as if waiting for those words, smiled gently, "Then let's go." "Go where?" Olivia Carter was taken aback. Richard Lancaster gestured towards the carriage outside, "To my estate, of course. Unless you'd rather stay at Carter Estate to help." His teasing smile made Olivia Carter blush even deeper. She boarded the carriage, still silently reproaching him. Stepping into Prince Richard Lancaster's estate, Olivia Carter couldn't help but gasp in awe. Although Richard Lancaster was considered somewhat incompetent among the princes, his status still afforded him considerable privilege. Leading her through corridors and courtyards, Richard Lancaster brought her to a study. "This is the quietest place in the prince's estate. No one will disturb you here. Make yourself comfortable, I'll have someone bring you tea." Without waiting for his response, Olivia Carter summoned a servant. But instead of a maid, a matron entered. Olivia Carter observed her from head to toe, impressed. Even though Richard Lancaster wasn't a perfect prince, his staff seemed to possess a certain spirit and bearing. "Greetings, Miss Carter." Before Olivia Carter could speak, the matron bowed with a smile, her eyes sharp as she assessed her. Olivia Carter was about to speak when the matron added, "What can I do for you, Miss Carter?" Speechless, Olivia Carter turned to Richard Lancaster, who offered a wry smile. She shook her head, deciding not to argue with the matron, and simply nodded, "Bring whatever tea the third prince usually drinks." "His Highness doesn't usually drink tea," the matron replied with a smile, her answer surprisingly direct. Olivia Carter, about to turn away, paused and reassessed the by-the-book matron. Her initial admiration faded, replaced by a cool detachment as the matron's smile seemed to lose its sincerity. "Then bring whatever he usually drinks," Olivia Carter said, her voice stiffening even to her own ears. "Miss Carter," the matron replied with the same unwavering smile, "His Highness doesn't usually drink anything at all." Olivia Carter was momentarily speechless. Olivia Carter's competitive spirit flared. She found herself increasingly intrigued by this matron. "Your Highness, the third prince, I never expected the servants in your mansion to be so extraordinary." Olivia Carter circled the old nurse twice, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Richard Lancaster seemed utterly exasperated. He gave a wry, bitter chuckle and waved his hand dismissively at Olivia Carter. "Don't mind her," he said, then turned to the nurse. "Brew a pot of that Tiguanyan tea second brother sent over a few days ago and bring it up." Olivia Carter had assumed the nurse simply intended to give her a hard time, but Richard Lancaster's words were absolute. To her surprise, the nurse wiped the smirk off her face, bowed respectfully to Richard Lancaster, and uttered words that shattered Olivia Carter's composure. "Your Highness, seeing as you haven't partaken of tea lately, we distributed the Tiguanyan amongst the staff. We beg your forgiveness." Olivia Carter felt a surge of unvented fury in her chest, but then Richard Lancaster chuckled, smoothing things over. "Is that so? Then bring a pot of hot water instead." The nurse acknowledged his words and turned to leave. Olivia Carter strode over to Richard Lancaster, her anger barely contained. "Being bullied by your siblings outside is one thing, but to be bullied by your own servants in your own home? You're a prince. This is utterly pathetic." She plopped down on the chair opposite him. Richard Lancaster maintained his smile, his eyes brightening as he watched Olivia Carter fume on his behalf. Laughing? You can still laugh. I've had enough of this in one visit. I can't imagine how you endure this daily. Olivia Carter scoffed, a flicker of pity in her eyes as she looked at Richard Lancaster. Richard Lancaster's smile vanished. He turned away, his voice low. Don't look at me like that. Olivia Carter realized then that Richard Lancaster possessed a fierce pride. But why could he endure such humiliation from others, even his own kin, yet be so sensitive to her gaze? Before she could ponder further, the nurse returned with a pot of hot water, which she placed on the table before standing silently. Your Highness, the nurse said, her demeanor shifting to one of bland efficiency, the medicinal herbs in the rear garden are ready for harvest. When would you like them gathered? Olivia Carter couldn't fathom why the nurse would bring this up now. Richard Lancaster frowned. Didn't you used to handle these matters yourself? Why consult me now? The nurse lowered her eyes, her expression placid. I'm getting old, Your Highness. I fear my judgment may no longer be sound, and I wouldn't want to displease you. I thought it best to seek your guidance from now on, to avoid any unintentional offense. A cold smile touched Olivia Carter's lips. So, it was aimed at her after all. Late at night, Richard Lancaster waved his hand, and the nurse withdrew. Richard Lancaster, noticing Olivia Carter's silence, looked at her and asked, What are you thinking? Olivia Carter held up her hands, feigning a dilemma. I'm debating whether or not I should marry you. Amusement flickered in Richard Lancaster's eyes. You've seen her prowess, he teased. She's no match for you. Olivia Carter understood. She referred to the nurse. Olivia Carter didn't want to dwell on the topic. Their connection was tenuous, a matter of mutual convenience, nothing more. We should consider what gift to give His Majesty for his birthday. Olivia Carter changed the subject, stood up, and walked around, observing Richard Lancaster's study. Indeed, there were many books, mostly biographies of famous people, strange tales, and legendary novels taking up most of the space, with a few medical books piled in the corner of the shelf, covered in dust. Olivia Carter picked up a book, dusted it off, and frowned with displeasure. Your servants are good-for-nothings, aren't they? They can't even clean your study. Richard Lancaster just smiled faintly without saying anything, his eyes following Olivia Carter as she walked back and forth, her every move catching his attention. Under Richard Lancaster's intense gaze, Olivia Carter felt uncomfortable all over, and finally couldn't bear it any longer. Third Prince, how can I think peacefully with you here? A knowing smile appeared on Richard Lancaster's face, clearly asking on purpose, I haven't made a sound, haven't disturbed you, so why can't you calm down? Olivia Carter didn't know what to do, so she said, How about this, you go do something else first, and I'll tell you as soon as I think of something, all right? Otherwise, I won't be able to come up with anything, and this trip will be a waste. Richard Lancaster didn't make things difficult for her, nodding and walking out of the study, thoughtfully closing the door behind him. Olivia Carter sat behind the desk, thinking things over. His Majesty is the monarch of a country, beauties, wealth, power, and territory are all in his hands, all things he can satisfy himself with. However, as his son, giving beauties would be too shallow and risky, wealth and power cannot surpass the emperor's, and territory, unless conquered from another country, is too far-fetched and, from the emperor's perspective, too mundane. Subconsciously, Olivia Carter didn't want Richard Lancaster to continue being humiliated at the emperor's birthday banquet, so she tried to think of a gift that was both unique and pleasing to His Majesty. Her gaze shifted, suddenly stopping on a stone used as a decorative object in the study. His Majesty has been in his high position for a long time, what he lacks are novelties. An idea flashed in Olivia Carter's mind, she had a plan, and immediately got up and left the study to inform Richard Lancaster. But as soon as she stepped out the door, she realized she had no idea where Richard Lancaster was, so she wandered around the area near the study, waiting for him. In front of the study was a small, exquisite garden, a small river flowing under an arched bridge, following the embankment and then escaping through the high wall. Olivia Carter sat on a rock by the river, boredly stirring the water with her hand, startling the fish in the clear stream, causing them to swim in disarray. Olivia Carter found it amusing, trying to catch a goldfish that was entirely red, with only a bit of white at the junction between its head and body. She couldn't help but take 2 steps forward. But suddenly, the stone beneath her feet slipped, and she fell straight into the river. There was a willow branch hanging down to the water's surface nearby. Olivia Carter quickly grabbed a handful, intending to use it to regain her footing. Unexpectedly, the willow branch suddenly snapped, and Olivia Carter lost her balance, seeing that she was about to fall into the river. "Your Highness, Miss Carter is here." From the corner of her eye, she saw Richard Lancaster's servant, Henry Cole, running towards her in a panic. Chapter 12, False Accusation. Olivia Carter closed her eyes, thinking, "This is it, I'm going to make a fool of myself," but suddenly felt the willow branch in her hand being gripped, a strong force pulling her away from danger. When she opened her eyes, she saw Henry Cole, panting and still frightened, patting his chest a few times before clasping his hands and saying to Richard Lancaster, who had just arrived, "Miss Carter is all right." Richard Lancaster, his worry evident, pulled Olivia Carter closer and carefully examined her from head to toe, finally adding with lingering concern, "If you like fish, I'll have someone catch them for you. It's best to avoid such dangerous places." Calling his own garden a dangerous place. Was this really his estate? Olivia Carter found it amusing, but recalling the previous scene, she couldn't help but feel suspicious. "Someone in your estate is trying to harm me," Olivia Carter stated, looking directly into Richard Lancaster's eyes. Richard Lancaster's face darkened. He turned his head and said to Henry Cole, "Go about your business." Henry Cole took his leave, but Olivia Carter's gaze followed his retreating figure, her eyes unwavering. Richard Lancaster waved a hand in front of her face, speaking seriously, "You don't suspect Henry Cole, do you? He's served me faithfully for a long time. It couldn't be him." Richard Lancaster immediately denied the possibility. Olivia Carter caught the implication in his words and stared into Richard Lancaster's eyes. "So, you already knew someone was trying to harm me?" Richard Lancaster, displeased, turned and walked towards the study. Olivia Carter followed closely behind, persistently questioning, "If not, why did you immediately believe me? This is your estate, you should know who resides here. You believed me based on a single sentence. If you didn't already know." As Olivia Carter continued to press him, Richard Lancaster suddenly turned, meeting her gaze, and enunciated each word clearly, "I didn't know. I trust you." With that intense gaze upon her once more, Olivia Carter blushed, averting her eyes and entering the study first. After they were both seated, Richard Lancaster still asked, "How can you be certain someone wanted to harm you? Losing your footing and falling into the river by the bank is a natural occurrence." Olivia Carter's thoughts raced, but she looked searchingly at Richard Lancaster. "You knew I was going fishing, you must have seen everything." "I could tell, couldn't you see someone trying to harm me?" Richard Lancaster shook his head, his gaze overly sincere. "I didn't." Olivia Carter shrugged helplessly, "Perhaps it was just my imagination." She decided not to argue with Richard Lancaster about it any further. Olivia Carter had always been afraid of water. While by the riverbank, she had been very careful where she stepped, trying to ensure her safety. She distinctly felt that it wasn't because the stone beneath her feet was slippery, but that as she stepped forward, a stone, seemingly thrown from somewhere, appeared right under her foot. She stepped on it, lost her balance, and tumbled into the water due to the stone's momentum. What made her even more certain was that she had carefully examined the broken willow branch she had grabbed onto. It was clearly cut by something sharp, not a natural break. This meant someone had used a hidden weapon to sever the branch she was using to save herself. Whether Richard Lancaster saw it or not, Olivia Carter wasn't sure, but Henry Cole's appearance and rescue surprised her. Not because he appeared, but because he saved her. In the midst of her struggles, a normal person couldn't accurately grab the flailing willow branch, yet Henry Cole did, making Olivia Carter suspect he possessed some hidden skill. But with Richard Lancaster before her, maintaining an innocent facade, Olivia Carter couldn't glean any useful information from him and avoided mentioning the incident. With time for a riverside stroll, have you thought of a gift for the Emperor's birthday? Richard Lancaster always steered the conversation skillfully. Olivia Carter glanced at him, nodding. Does the third prince recall the stone gambling wager with the sixth prince? I deciphered the imperial jade, the Emperor's green. Richard Lancaster looked at her skeptically. What does that have to do with the Emperor's birthday gift? Olivia Carter smiled, smugly. How about crafting the Emperor's green into a dragon ring for His Majesty? What in the Eastern Victory Kingdom could compare? Richard Lancaster's eyes brightened, fixed on Olivia Carter, a smile gracing his face, his voice brimming with delight. What a splendid idea, Olivia Carter. Such thoughtfulness. Just 2 sentences of affirmation sweetened Olivia Carter's heart, a shy smile playing on her lips under Richard Lancaster's gaze. Immediately, Richard Lancaster dispatched someone to have the Emperor's green fashioned into a dragon ring. The two admired the dragon ring, both pleased. Richard Lancaster's gaze held increased admiration for Olivia Carter. She set the ring down, about to excuse herself, when she heard soft footsteps outside. Unannounced, a figure in red entered, hurried and forceful. Olivia Carter looked up, taking in the slender, swaying waist, perhaps unsteady from the haste. Higher, on a delicate oval face, angry eyes glared at her. Olivia Carter tilted her head towards Richard Lancaster, her eyes questioning, "What's the situation?" Richard Lancaster spoke softly, "Fei Zhou, a concubine bestowed upon me by the Empress." A concise explanation that spoke volumes. Olivia Carter almost laughed. Fei Zhou. Her parents certainly had a way with names. What are you laughing at? Fei Zhou demanded, seeing Richard Lancaster not only fail to greet her but directly address Olivia Carter, his tone clearly unfriendly. Olivia Carter bristled, glancing at Richard Lancaster, thinking, what sort of people are in his household? Servants lacking manners, and a young lady so uncouth. Olivia Carter composed herself, masking her amusement, shaking her head silently. Fei Zhou circled Olivia Carter twice, declaring haughtily, "You don't even curtsy before me. It seems those from Carter estate lack breeding." Her words were vulgar, utterly dismissive of Olivia Carter. Olivia Carter paused, then replied calmly, each word striking home, "You are merely the third prince's concubine, while I am his betrothed, the future imperial consort. Pray tell, who truly lacks breeding?" Olivia Carter always adhered to the principle of live and let live, but with a tit-for-tat personality, she responded sharply. Vanessa Young, enraged by Olivia Carter's words, paled then flushed crimson, unable to retort, anxiously glancing at Richard Lancaster. Richard Lancaster calmly sipped water, fully utilizing his advantage of being hard of hearing, looking at the two without comprehension, unclear whether he genuinely couldn't hear or was merely feigning. Vanessa Young, face burning with fury, her eyes darting, noticed the jade ring nestled in a brocade box on the table. She shot a glance at Olivia Carter, a strange smile playing on her lips. Olivia Carter watched as she circled her, picked up the dragon ring from the brocade box, examined it, then turned back to Olivia Carter, saying, "I hear you advise the third prince, intending this dragon ring as a birthday gift for His Majesty." Olivia Carter, unwilling to engage with her, focused on the dragon ring, a subconscious sense of foreboding telling her Vanessa Young had ill intentions towards it. Seeing Olivia Carter fixated on the ring, ignoring her, Vanessa Young seethed inwardly. She thrust the ring towards Olivia Carter, her tone peculiar, "It said you won this in a stone gambling match with the sixth prince. To think the famously foolish third Miss Carter understands precious stones, unheard of." I'm curious, how did you recognize this as imperial jade? Do tell. As she spoke, she extended the ring towards Olivia Carter, eyes blinking rapidly. Olivia Carter couldn't refuse, firstly due to Vanessa Young's status, secondly because that damned Richard Lancaster acted as if nothing was amiss, standing aside with a detached expression, showing no intention of intervening. She gritted her teeth and reached out. Unexpectedly, before she could grasp it, Vanessa Young released her hold. The dragon ring plummeted, shattering into two pieces. Ah, Vanessa Young gasped, covering her mouth, pointing accusingly at Olivia Carter, then turning to Richard Lancaster, shrieking, "Heavens! Olivia Carter, you dared break the dragon ring the third prince intended for His Majesty. Your audacity is astounding." Olivia Carter frowned at Richard Lancaster. He'd undoubtedly witnessed the scene, whose fault it was needed no explanation, he could discern the truth. Vanessa Young rushed to Richard Lancaster's side, gesturing at the shards on the floor, then at Olivia Carter, shaking his arm and exclaiming, "Third Prince, look! Olivia Carter broke the dragon ring you planned to gift His Majesty. You must severely punish her." Olivia Carter sneered inwardly. Such an artless accusation, and she thought it would work. Richard Lancaster rose, patting Vanessa Young's hand gently, signaling her to calm down. This action bewildered Olivia Carter. Vanessa Young was clearly at fault, yet Richard Lancaster not only refrained from reprimanding her but seemed inclined to protect her. "Third Prince, this dragon ring wasn't." Olivia Carter began to explain, but seeing Richard Lancaster's placid expression, she swallowed the rest of her words. What more could be said? Olivia Carter mocked herself. She'd actually expected this timid prince to defend her, to punish Vanessa Young. But it seemed he dared not cross Vanessa Young, maintaining his weak facade. Looking back at Vanessa Young, her arrogance and haughty demeanor, coupled with her erect neck held high in pride, only served to irritate others. Easily controlled by a woman, it's no wonder Richard Lancaster held no status among the princes. It wasn't just his shortcomings, but his lack of resistance, his constant obedience to others, that led to his current predicament. And he himself seemed not only unwilling to change but content with it. Olivia Carter bowed her head in frustration, glancing at the shattered jade on the ground, her heart filled with anger. "Your Highness, it's getting late," she said to Richard Lancaster. "I'll take my leave." Richard Lancaster detected her displeasure but, with Vanessa Young present, couldn't show excessive concern. He merely gave a curt, indifferent nod. Vanessa Young, unwilling to let Olivia Carter go, clung to Richard Lancaster's arm and said petulantly, "Your Highness, don't pamper Miss Carter too much. Today she breaks a dragon ring, tomorrow, married into the family, who knows what trouble she'll cause. As I see it, this kind of woman is dispensable." Chapter 13, Rescue from Peril. Olivia Carter's knuckles cracked as she clenched her fists. Lifting her head, she looked at Richard Lancaster, her face expressionless, her voice laced with sarcasm. "Your Highness, you are a prince of a nation, yet you allow a concubine to speak so recklessly. Truly, you bring great honor to the Eastern Victory Kingdom." Vanessa Young's face changed, her eyes flashing with anger at Olivia Carter. Turning to Richard Lancaster, she complained, her voice thick with feigned grievance, "Your Highness, look at her." Despite this, Richard Lancaster maintained his indifferent expression, his gaze calm and unfocused as he looked at the two women, as if oblivious to the conflict between them. Olivia Carter couldn't stand it. He used this feigned ignorance to deal with Vanessa Young, did he not understand it only diminished his standing? Turning, she decisively left. On the way, Olivia Carter berated Richard Lancaster in her mind, yet also questioned her own anger. She wanted nothing to do with him, only using him out of necessity. Why then did she worry about his fate? What was the meaning of this? His situation is his own affair. As long as I can leave the Carter family and accomplish my goals, then anyone, everyone, becomes irrelevant. Olivia Carter reaffirmed her resolve. It was nearing midnight. To save time, Olivia Carter dismissed the carriage Richard Lancaster had sent and walked through the long alley, seeking a shortcut. Halt! 3 masked figures in black suddenly appeared, their voices low and gruff. Olivia Carter froze, stopping in her tracks. She carefully observed the 3 men before her and asked coldly, 3 strapping lads, instead of honest work, you skulk in the night. Such great ambitions are truly admirable. Olivia Carter, already in a foul mood, saw these 3 as convenient targets. She didn't hesitate to taunt them, venting the anger she couldn't direct at Vanessa Young and Richard Lancaster. In the end, it was just a fight. Olivia Carter didn't give it much thought. The 3 men, upon hearing this, were visibly taken aback. In their long careers, this was the first time anyone had shown concern for their future. However, this didn't deter them from continuing their business. The tall, thin man at the front chuckled, slowly approaching. His raspy voice echoed, "My dear beauty, our grand ambitions now rest solely upon you. With your flower-like beauty, you are truly a rare gem, surpassing even the most celebrated courtesan of the drunken spring house." The skinny man on the left, rubbing his hands together, leered at Olivia Carter, his gaze fixated. Indeed, he agreed, we're in luck today, brothers. After we've had our fun, we can sell her to the Chin Lu and make a hefty profit. His laughter reverberated through the long alley. The tall, thin man clearly disagreed. Stepping closer, he rubbed his hands and glanced at the fat man on the right. "Third brother, what do you think? Should we let this beauty go to someone else, or keep her for ourselves?" The fat man, eyes glued to Olivia Carter, immediately dismissed the skinny man's suggestion. Pointing at her, he declared, "Keep her for ourselves, of course." Realizing he'd overstepped, he forced a laugh and looked at the tall, thin man. He, whatever boss says." Olivia Carter, watching the 3 men approach, backed away slowly, then realized with a start that she was surrounded. Turning, she saw 2 black-clad, masked figures. The tall, thin man smirked. "Don't run, beauty. You're ours one way or another. There's no escape." Olivia Carter found his confidence amusing. A cold smile played on her lips as she retorted, "Oh really? Then I'd like to see whether your 5 men are more formidable, or my fists and feet." The 5 men, apparently unaccustomed to being challenged, especially by a seemingly frail girl like Olivia Carter, exchanged glances before bursting into laughter. The tall, thin man, with a sneer, gestured towards Olivia Carter with a mockingly courteous bow. "Very well, we'd be delighted to play with you, my dear. Be our guest." While they spoke, Olivia Carter had been observing them carefully. The fat man waddled, his heavy breathing audible after only a few steps in pursuit. He was clearly not skilled in combat and would be an easy target. The 2 men behind, however, seemed genuinely dangerous. Their eyes glinted with a predatory cruelty. The tall, thin man and the skinny one seemed to have some internal conflict, a rift she could potentially exploit. Even if she couldn't defeat them all, she could at least disrupt their coordination. Olivia Carter was already seething. It was a case of when it rains, it pours. After enduring humiliation at the prince's mansion, she now faced this unwarranted indignity on her way home. Her inner universe was a powder keg, primed to explode. She felt she'd be doing herself a disservice if she didn't unleash her fury on these men. Her eyes darted, and she lunged towards the skinny man. The tall man and the skinny man moved to intercept, but as she neared the skinny man, Olivia Carter abruptly changed direction, charging towards the fat one. The fat man was stunned. By the time he reacted, Olivia Carter had almost slipped through the gap beside him. However, the boss was quick, sweeping his leg out to trip Olivia Carter. She reacted swiftly, grabbing his outstretched arm, leaping out of the circle, and delivering a powerful kick to the tall man's leg. He groaned, his contemptuous look vanishing as he realized he'd underestimated this beautiful woman. His movements became much more aggressive. Soon, 5 men surrounded Olivia Carter, attacking relentlessly in a rotating formation. Olivia Carter relied on a few basic modern martial arts moves, far inferior to those who were truly trained. Plus, her stamina wasn't great, and after a few exchanges, she felt exhaustion creeping in. This wouldn't do. As the skinny man grabbed her hand, Olivia Carter cried. "Out, what are you doing? Trying to break my arm? Cripple me?" She knew the boss had a soft spot for women, his earlier look had been full of desire, clearly wanting her for himself. Accusing the skinny man was just a ploy to get him out of the fight. Sure enough, the tall man stepped forward, swatting the skinny man's hand away from Olivia Carter. "This woman's mine," he snarled. "You best not have any ideas about her. Then, to the others, take her alive. Don't lay a finger on her." His words reassured Olivia Carter. As long as her life and body were safe, she could play along for now. From the corner of her eye, Olivia Carter saw the disgruntled skinny man step aside, refusing to participate further. Now, only 4 remained. Olivia Carter was strategizing her escape when suddenly, 2 of the men in front of her dropped to the ground with a thud, without even a whimper. Not just Olivia Carter, but the remaining 3 also looked towards the newcomer. It was the masked man who had saved her life before. Joy surged through Olivia Carter, invigorating her. While the other 3 were still stunned, she seized the opportunity, knocking the fat man unconscious. Only the tall man and the skinny man were left. They exchanged a look. Despite their earlier disagreement, they now had to face a common enemy. Both warily eyed the masked man. The tall man sized up the masked man. "Who are you?" The masked man said nothing, taking 2 steps forward, causing the tall and skinny men to stumble back. Feeling strangely safe with the masked man protecting her, Olivia Carter straightened, glared at the 2, and raised her fists. "Well? Still wanna fight?" Unable to withstand Olivia Carter's taunt, the 2 men glanced at the masked man, then at their fallen comrades. Gritting their teeth, they charged. The masked man and Olivia Carter exchanged a look. As the 2 men lunged, they abruptly split apart. The attackers, momentum carrying them forward, couldn't stop or turn in time. This created the perfect opening. Olivia Carter, with a powerful chop, leaped and struck the skinny man's neck. He swayed, then crumpled to the ground. Glancing over, the masked man effortlessly took down the tall thug. Dusting off her hands, Olivia Carter sighed in relief, feeling much lighter. Strolling side by side back towards Carter Estate, Olivia Carter hummed a tune, gazing at the night sky, her mood seemingly much improved. "You seem to enjoy a good brawl," the masked man observed frankly, looking at Olivia Carter. Olivia Carter glanced at him, tilting her chin up. "You seem to enjoy wearing that mask, and rescuing damsels in distress." Unfazed by Olivia Carter's retort, the masked man's eyes crinkled slightly, a clear indication of amusement, even a hint of playful mischief. "What's so funny?" Olivia Carter couldn't help but ask. The masked man shook his head, seeing Olivia Carter's slight pout. "You were in a foul mood earlier, weren't you? A good fight seems to have lifted your spirits." Olivia Carter caught the implication. "So you saw I was in trouble, but chose to observe." A touch of apology colored the masked man's voice. "I merely saw you were in need of an outlet for your frustration. That's why I didn't intervene immediately." Olivia Carter scoffed, thinking that if he had intervened sooner, she might have directed her anger at him. The thought struck her with sudden clarity. Pointing at the masked man, she exclaimed, "You were afraid I'd drag you into it, weren't you? That's why you waited until I'd vented my anger before helping." Caught out, the masked man didn't flinch, admitting with a nod, "That was indeed my thought process at the time." ###Chapter 14, shared understanding. Olivia Carter said nothing, shaking her head as she continued walking. Then she heard the masked man gesture towards a still-open tavern ahead, calling out, "If you're still feeling down, why not drown your sorrows?" Olivia Carter shot him a look. Wine and meat are poisons to the gut. Knowing that drinking only exacerbates sorrow, why indulge? Besides, I'm fine now. The masked man stepped forward, giving her no chance to refuse, pulling her towards the tavern. Drinking is best enjoyed when one is cheerful. I know you don't want to return to Carter Estate just yet. Why not be a little reckless for once? His words struck a chord. Olivia Carter ceased her resistance, accompanying the masked man to the tavern, finding a place to sit. With fine wine and food served, they raised their glasses, discovering a shared appreciation for strong drink. The night was peaceful and quiet. Across from her sat a considerate, respectful masked man, not prying into her personal affairs, simply offering his silent companionship.